Tonight's episode is told in 3 parts. It's the story of a woman whose life was forever changed by love, loss, and the pursuit of truth. This is Samantha Bassett. Part 1, Simply Samantha. What's going on, Team Trek family? Welcome back to another episode. In the studio tonight, I've got a very special friend joining us. Samantha, welcome Team Trek Podcast.
Appreciate you bringing me in here.
Well, I know it was quite a drive getting you out here, and I'm really happy to have finally gotten you here. So let's talk a little bit about how I found you, right? You were pretty certain that it was a certain clip that you put out on TikTok, right?
Right.
All right. Talk to us a little bit about that clip.
When you're scrolling on TikTok, it's so hard to gain that audience of what you're trying to do to reach that niche that you're trying to reach. And for me, that niche is the veteran community. And so reaching out to them and getting the point across and getting people to listen to you, I had to figure out a way to be deliberate and to the point and catchy. And the very first things that I said on that video were, my husband didn't kill himself because of this, and that was meant to be a hook. It was meant to grab attention. And the reason that I went about it that way was it would draw people in to want to listen to what I said leading up to that, which was about the paradox of the moral injury that Mitchell dealt with.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the one, right? And what it was for me is you're right, that hook right away. My husband didn't kill himself. That got me, okay, because obviously that's the field that we're in right now, right? Is trying to save lives. Everything was pro-veteran, so I don't really know how the algorithm works per se, but you popped up in my feed that day. And to me, the way you described the event, it wasn't a long clip, but the verbiage you used, you spoke to it like you really understood it on a different level. Like I hadn't really heard anybody speak to you before. And so, yes, I reached out. I think I just told you a little bit more about what we're trying to do here at Team Trek. And I wanted to gauge your interest on coming out and actually telling your story. So with that being said, I'm super interested. Like, tell me a little bit about you, like where you're from, where you started. Like, tell me you as little Samantha.
So I'm from Millbrook, Alabama, born and raised. It's right outside of Montgomery. And growing up there, Montgomery is seen as like a kind of a bigger city for Alabama. It's not necessarily considered very country, but Millbrook is. So it's more the suburban side. When I was growing up, we had one red light throughout the entire town. And in this little town that I grew up in, my parents owned a business. And so it was a family business that I grew up in. And I probably started working there when I was 6 or 7 years old, from the time that I could reach a register.
What was the business?
It was a fitness center. So one of the things that my dad did growing up was get a bachelor degree in business management. So he's very, very good, very skilled in that. A lot of what I do now, bartending and whatnot, I get those skills from my father, and I've learned from him. He was very good at all of that type of stuff.
How would you classify your status, right? Were you guys middle class? Were you guys upper class?
They thought that we were upper class, and we really weren't. We were always struggling. My parents were always just above like the poverty line, or what back then would have been considered middle class. They were very middle class-ish, but they weren't comfortable, So the fact that I worked there really did boil down to, we didn't have the money to hire a bunch of workers. We didn't have the money for a ton of employees, but that really instilled like that work ethic in me very young. It really pushed me to be independent and to practice critical thinking. That was something that my father really instilled in me. And that was really evolved in that gym. Outside of working, though, it kind of was one of the best places to be as kids. Like we talk about how it's not the same anymore because we have phones and we don't get out and everything. But like we had a bike rack, out there by the tennis ball court. And that was the thing to do for anybody that was in that area during the summer times. Was all the kids would ride their bikes and park their bikes at Paradise, and we would go jump in the pool. And every day there'd be 50, 60 kids in this pool. So like I was a fish growing up, and I wouldn't say cool popular, but I was very social popular. I was very well known.
Was there any sports or anything that you focused a lot of your time on?
The first thing I really got into was swimming. It was a sport in a way of an outside activity, but I never really started playing competitive sports until I started playing softball. And that was something that I really enjoyed doing. I was a catcher for a long time. Early on, I threw out my shoulder. Throwing my shoulder out really did mess me up there. And I played a little bit of shortstop, and just a little insight of like, it really played into who I am now. Like my dad was Army. Like he was Army Airborne, and he was kind of a hardened guy, and he taught us how to be like tough exterior.
Well,
and
wait a minute. Let's define Army Airborne real quick. What did he do for?
I can't tell you all of that. Like I really don't know. He doesn't like talking about it.
Give me a holler, Dad, when you get this. We'll talk. We'll talk about it on the down low. So okay,
yeah. So I mean, I'm sure I could ask him, but like growing up, that's not something he really talked about. Like he has a Bronze Star, and asking him growing up, like, hey, what'd you get that Bronze Star for? And he's like, I had a job. They gave me a job. I did my job really well. They gave me an award for it. That's all the information that we ever got from that. And so it was hard to like get anything really emotional out of my father. He just wasn't a very emotional person. And then outside of that, he raised us to be tough, just like he was tough, just like the military made him tough, and his dad being military made him tough. Like his dad worked planes and whatnot. And so his dad was kind of still that gruff personality as well, just like my father was.
So tell me about your mom.
She's shy. Imagine almost the exact opposite of me. Every bit of gruffness that I have, like I'm my father reincarnate. I don't really act like my mother. My mother is very soft-spoken. She has a hard time making eye contact sometimes with people. She's easy to let people walk over her, but she's very, very sweet. There was a point in time before she was diagnosed with MS. You could tell the anger and the outburst were there. Like during our childhood, there were times where she would get very angry over things, but it wasn't necessarily anything that she could control. And we didn't know that as children, that she wasn't able to control that. She didn't even understand that she couldn't control that. And we learned a lot after she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I will say that like her grandson coming in, the first grandchild that she had, my sister's child, her pride and joy, it really softened her and my father both, which is an insane idea. Ryan ran into his truck one time with like a little Jeep, and my mom called me and told me about it. And I was like, oh, Jesus. What did Dad do? Did he lose his mind? And she was like, no, actually, he laughed about it and like was like, hey, man, be careful. You're going to hurt yourself. And I was like, wow. Are you joking right now? Like I would have definitely gotten a spanking for that.
People change. It's crazy. Those hard exteriors, they tend to like melt away. And I guess as we get older, we realize the important things in life. And yeah, raising your kids to be tough and disciplined, and that's what I was hearing in your stories, all the confidence that your parents were building by allowing you to make mistakes. And you knew there was consequence to your mistakes. And that's why it was so surprising that Ryan is still breathing after, hitting Dad's truck. But anyway, without digressing, I love the way that you're describing how you grew up, right? If parents were there, they were on top of it, and sounds amazing. So tell me what high school looked like for you.
There was one thing that if you could have asked me from the time that I was in like second grade to the time that I almost until I graduated, what I wanted to do with my life. It would have been, I would have told you, JAG officer for the Marine Corps. That's what Samantha wanted to do. I was very stern in that. Like, I really wanted to join the military. And I think that played into kind of like the passion that I have for it now. Like, but in the same sense, that was something that was really important to me. So I went through the JROTC program. And the first thing that you have to do during that is go through the traditional class, right? You have the first bit of class to go through, and they teach you your basic movements, your about face, left face.
Your drill and ceremony.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Your basic drills, cadences, ranks,
and
phonetic
this is
alphabet.
high school JROTC,
Exactly.
right? So this is your junior. Was it Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine?
Army.
It was Army, okay.
So it was Army. I started with the traditional class, but it was always with the incentive of joining the physical fitness team.
Okay.
You had to go through that first year of just general class to be on any of their special teams, whether
right.
that be
orienteering or
exactly. If you wanted to be a part of the drill team, if you wanted to be a part of the color guard or the radar team, that's what we were called.
Okay, nice.
Was our physical fitness team. It was the radar team, and we were very well known. It was ran by a guy named Doc Major Hicks, and by the time that I got there, he had already been 15 years coaching at this school for their instructor, as their JROTC instructor, and working as that Raiders coach. And so for 15 years, they were undefeated. Like, they never lost. They always took first, second, third, first team, second team, first male, second place male, first place female, and there's always been one female to the team. And before me, there was a female, and she was a beast, just an absolute beast. And I always aspired to be her. She was what I wanted to be when I grew up. I mean, Doc wouldn't put us in competition if you couldn't score a 300. And for anybody that doesn't know, on an Army physical fitness test, 300 is a perfect score. And for us, that was, for a female, it's 48 push-ups, 78 sit-ups, and a 15:42 mile is what it was back then. That was your basis to make a perfect score. So if you couldn't do all of that, you didn't touch competition. Like, we were superior, and he didn't need slackers.
Right.
He was very, very good at what he did. And so as I'm going through, starting in, I get that first year into it, and I'm trying to prove myself. I want to be a Raider. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Holly just left. The legacy is gone. There are no female Raiders at this point. I would be the only female. So I'm coming into this class, one of 9. I'm the female. And in the beginning, Doc really... he separated us. As me being the female, he would go in and be like, all right, guys, y'all do 50 push-ups, and Sam, you do 30. Or guys, you do 40 sit-ups right now, and Sam, you do 20. And so I took him to the side, like, very early on. It was probably about 2 weeks into starting with the Raider team. And I had proven that I was good enough to be there, but I hadn't really gotten the groove of working out with them yet. And so I pulled him aside, and I was like, hey, Doc, like, I understand that on a scientific level, I may not be able to physically do as much as the guys can. Like, scientifically, I can't. I'm not built to. But I don't want to be expected less of. I don't want to, like, even if I max out, even if I can't do it, still, like, I want to be held to the same standard. I want to be the best I can be here. Like, I want to join the Marine Corps, which means the physical side of it's extremely important to me.
Right.
And like I said, I had asthma, so everybody was against this. And my mom told me, one asthma attack, I'm out. I'm not allowed to do it anymore, which didn't stick. But but it was one of those things. And so it was important to me that I was the best that I could be. Sure. And he looked at me and he was like, Davis, that's my maiden name.
Oh, okay.
He said, Davis, I'm going to make you a beast. And I promise you, that was the worst decision I ever made, because that man destroyed me when it came to physical fitness training. And I was a beast. I was the #1 female athlete in the Southeast region for 3 years. I was 148 pounds and like 7% body fat. I was absolutely ripped. It was insane how good I mean, like, I was literally getting down and doing 80 push-ups with the guys.
That's impressive.
It was highly impressive. I had Marine recruiters beating down my doors to get to me.
Okay, what else was going on in high school? So outside of the JRTC competitions and this goal of getting into Marine Corps JAG,
I had a plan. I had a whole process. Go through the JRTC program, be the best as far as the physical fitness goes. That way I can get those like academic scholarships and things for school while also gauging the attention of the military like I wanted.
So everything's working out the way you want it to.
And it was absolutely working the way that I wanted it to. I was going to graduate, join the Marine Corps, do 4 years enlisted, come back, do 4 years OTS, and then go through law school. That was my plan. And then go back and finishing the rest of my career as an officer.
Okay.
And that was what I wanted to do. That way I had a little bit of everything, like I wanted to be able to do my first little part as enlisted just so that I could get the experience of traveling and whatnot. But there's one thing that I was really dead set on during high school, and that was that I didn't date. You think of young girls between middle school and junior high and high school, and one thing that they care a lot about is their first boyfriend. Who's going to be their first boyfriend? Like experiencing that high school love, like that wasn't something that I was ever concerned with. It wasn't something that I wanted, and I just didn't show interest in it. I fully believed during that time that having a high school sweetheart was going to do nothing but blur my future. Like we're basing everything on if we're going to be with this person moving forward. And realistically, you're not going to be with your high school sweetheart 4 years after you graduate high school, right? Because you're different people when you're young. As you grow and you develop and you mature, things are going to change for you that age. I was very aware that shouldn't be taken more seriously until I was older, because it was going to affect such an important part in time in my life that was going to navigate what I did for the rest of my life. I was very aware of that.
So you avoided it at all costs for all those years, and then your senior year, what happened?
My senior year, I ended up meeting a guy that was playing baseball at Faulkner University.
Okay.
And I was intrigued, and he was a few years older than me. And that was kind of another thing that kept me away from dating during that time, was that I have never shown interest in guys my age. Not when I was younger, not when I was in high school, like even in friend idea. Like a lot of my friends were always 4 to 5 years older than me. And growing up in that gym, like I had the availability of being able to hang out with people well out of my age range without it feeling weird. But once I became a senior, I met this guy that was already in college. I didn't know him previously. I didn't grow up with him. He didn't look at me like a child. I just became infatuated with him. And we started dating rather, I guess you could consider it rather quickly. And so we dated through my entire senior year. And I always told him, like, in the beginning, like, hey, I'm joining the military. Like, I'm meeting you in my senior year, but like, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. I feel very passionate about it. And he was always okay with it because he was trying to make it big with the MLB. And so when he was struggling with things, like I tried really hard to help him. And it ended up being a situation where I focused more on trying to help him get ahead of the game than I was allowing myself to fall behind. And before I knew it, I was just stuck to where like I thought I was in love with this dude, and I wanted to be with him. And when it came time for me to join the military, he straight up told me that if I joined the military, he was going to break up with me. And we ended up being together for probably 2 more years after that. So by the time that we officially broke up, like I had gauged my ears out. I'd gotten a couple of tattoos. Like, I'd been on and off of antidepressants and so much stuff that I wouldn't have done if my goal was to go into the military. Because at that point, it's now hindering me. Now I have to get waivers. Now I have to come off medications and be off of them for a certain amount of time. And him breaking up with me, it sent me into this like spiral in that moment. And it just wasn't great. It's weird because I still teeter with that idea of joining the military, just going through it and getting all the waivers that I need. I don't know that it would be the smartest thing for me to do at this point, but it still feels like a dream that I haven't fulfilled, and I think that's really what brought me to that military side, to the fact that like almost everybody that I've dated or been with has been military. It was my way of like grasping the community that I wanted so badly to be a part of, that I so seemingly flushed down the toilet. And I didn't like the idea that I did that. And I think that's why I still continue, even outside of Mitchell, outside of the fact of wanting to honor him. Like, this is still a part of a community that I want. It's something that I've always wanted on a firsthand experience, not just as a spouse. It was a true ambition of mine, and it still feels like something that I could do and that I might possibly still end up doing, especially now.
I think that's awesome. I don't know all the rules and regulations, I'm not going to pretend to, but I think it's awesome that you have that calling. I mean, obviously it's been in your blood generation after generation, so it probably feels like that's the norm for you. But even being part of the military community, so when you did start dating, right, so prior to meeting Mitchell, did you always kind of want to date a military guy, or you just wanted to be in the military? Like, when you're,
how did it end up being that way?
Yeah, exactly. I'm really, really curious about that.
I don't know that I have 100% answer for that. I think it's the attraction level it's what I wanted for myself. And so I subconsciously drifted to that. But you could even consider dated 4 people in my entire life.
Okay.
Even up until this point. Up till right now.
Besides Mitchell, were any of them military or?
So.
And you've heard that, a lot of girls try to find their dad, right? Like when they're dating, when they get married, like they try to marry somebody to replicate their dad, which makes perfect sense. I mean, we are your security, like your whole life, right? And so you're looking to replace that security, right? You need to be playing on your phone and shopping, and we're over here, we got your security, that's what we do. It's our job. So anyway, were there more military guys, or was it just Mitchell that was military?
It was not just Mitchell.
Okay.
Starting out in high school, we dated the baseball player. And funny enough, that's the one that told me that he was going to break up with me if I joined the military.
Right.
On the flip side, they're in the military now.
Interesting.
Yeah. What a jackass. That's how I felt about that. The moment they joined because of that, I was like, oh, this guy, I
don't even know how you're mad. Again, he was going to play pro baseball. Like, we all have these crazy thoughts of what we're going to be. But anyway, okay.
I was irritated with it. So my next relationship after that was actually my marriage. I got married before Mitchell. So Mitchell was my second husband, but my first husband was my best friend from like second grade. And we were never anything but platonic. And we did all the stuff together. We walked from one town to another. We hunted snakes in the backyard. We wreaked havoc on my sister, got in trouble with our parents, snuck out of the house, like prank called people, rolled people's houses. Like, we were just like inseparable.
Sounds like you guys got into quite a bit of mischief growing up.
We did.
Kind of reminds me of the series, The Boxcar Children. Like, you guys going to other towns and everything.
We used to break into incomplete houses that were being built, and we We did not destroy them. I will say that. We were never the kids that went in and made a mess or destroyed anything. We just enjoyed being in there. It was a really weird thing, but I remember one of them lived right across the street from a neighborhood where a bunch of houses were being built. And we would go break into those little houses, like through a window that hadn't been complete or something. So technically, you breaking in, or are you just finding
You're
holes?
entering. There's no breaking. It's just entering.
It's just entering. We're still not supposed to be there. But we did all that type of stuff, and we had a ton of fun. And so up until we were 18, 19 years old, it was not a romantic thing.
Right.
I didn't crush on him. He didn't crush on me. You know, it was never in that way. And at that time, I had just broke up with the baseball player. So we're looking for anything. I'm constantly talking to my best friend about how I want to get out of this town. I just want to leave here. Like, I want to be somewhere new, you know, and he don't want to live in the barracks. This is a contract marriage at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We decide we're going to get married. I'm going to use the insurance. We're going to use the BAH. We can live together as roommates. There's nothing saying that we can't do that.
No, it's frowned upon.
It's definitely frowned upon. But
Sure.
we're young, okay?
Absolutely.
Like, I feel like almost all military guys go through one of those types of marriages. In a sense, there's a lot of them that do. Or at least they almost do. They think about it. They try something. This felt like the perfect situation because we were best friends. You know,
Sure.
like this wasn't a random girl that he met at the bar that was going to take off half of what he had.
Justify it to me. I hear you. Okay, so it's your first marriage, and you are married to a military guy who just happens to also be your best friend since
Exactly.
you guys were in second grade. So, okay.
It was completely platonic. We never kissed until the day we got married. When they say you may now, it was a courthouse thing. So It wasn't like we had a wedding. Our parents didn't know. It was secret.
Okay.
You know, it was all a secret because we didn't have a relationship at that time.
Well, besides being best friends.
Yeah, exactly. But we didn't have a romantic relationship. Our parents would have frowned upon this too, not just the military. And so let's see how it happens. See if like this is something that could work between us. And that blew up so fast. So fast. And to that point, I always tell people, never marry your best friend. Do not marry your best friend. You marry somebody that can become your best friend, but you don't marry your best friend because at that point, we had crossed so many lines. When you are with somebody intimately in a relationship, there's a line that you don't cross because it's disrespectful, right? Because you're scared to hurt their feelings. There's no line that really exists. I know all of your buttons. You know all of my buttons. If I'm mad at you, I know how to make you more mad. You know how to aggravate me. We know just how to push each other. And that becomes toxic very, very quickly. Very quickly. So it really destroyed not only any chance of us having some type of romantic relationship, but with it, our friendship. Like, our friendship suffered severely. We got to a point where it was obvious that he was falling in love with me, and I loved him, and I do to this day. I will always, always love him. I've never had any hate for him whatsoever, and I still don't. But I never was in love with him. And there's a big difference between loving somebody and being in love with them. And it just blew up so fast in a matter of like 9 months. And it was really, really hurtful in that way. Because while it wasn't a loss of like an intimate relationship, that friendship meant so much to me. And losing it hurt so bad. Like being in that motion where like you wanted to be there. And then afterwards I left. I come back here. I'm already like, I'm upset that I've lost my best friend. I'm upset that I'm moving back home. Now I'm 20 years old. I've now at this point flushed in my eyes the military down the toilet through dating the baseball player. I've already messed that up. So now I'm not joining the military. And then I thought I was going to like get out and adventure and start my own life. And we were just going to like ride this out, you know, and it just didn't work out well. It didn't work out as a friends thing. And then once we tried to add the romantic component to it, it just made it worse. And then I got back here and I was just angry. And that was around the same time that my mom was being diagnosed with MS. So we just found out about that. And it was just a really, really low period of time for me because I felt like my future was just drowning. Like, what am I doing with my life right now? I'm 20 years old. I'm returning to home. I'm having to live with my parents for like a week before I can get back on my feet. And then I got to this point, like I did move in with a couple of guys that were my friends, and it was about 4 of us, and we're all living there, but I was just, my lifestyle was so toxic because I was so depressed about being back in this town and feeling like I was going nowhere. So
what was your lifestyle then? I mean, kind of describe that. The future that you had in mind for you is you're just seeing it slip away. So like what, I know you're talking about you're in a depressed state, but what does that look like? What is your day to day on that?
During that time, one of the things that was big was I was working a lot. So as soon as I got back, I got a job within like a week, and I immediately started working 60, 70-hour weeks as a bartender and a server. Like I was showing up every single day, scheduled or not, it didn't matter.
You were already good with all the customer service stuff from all the time you'd spent in the
business
center. That's awesome.
And it was the fitness center, but it was also more than that because the day that I turned 16, like we sold the business, the family business, when I was 16 years old. But right before we sold it and I turned 16, the day I got my driver's license, I started working for Sonic. And I started out as just like a little car hop. And then I started working the switchboard. And then I became a trainer. And then I became a cook. And then I became a cross trainer. And then I became a shift lead. And then I became a manager. And right when I graduated high school, they offered me a management position. But again, like I was always a little bit above my years. Like I was even though I knew that I could handle that management position, the general management position they were offering me, I knew that at 17, I wasn't mature enough to be there. I knew that it was going to be something that I was going to felt down the road be stuck in. It wasn't something I wanted to do long term. I knew that I didn't have the emotional maturity to deal with what I needed to do as a general manager. While I had the capabilities and the education and the knowledge to be able to do so, I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to enjoy it or have the emotional capacity to really handle it in the right way. So I turned down that position. And that's really where I started like working all the time, is right after high school. Because my dad made me pay rent in high school. Like he was like, okay, you got this job, so you're going to give me $100 a month to go towards my rent. You're going to give me whatever money it is for your car payment each month. You're going to give me whatever money you need for your car insurance. From the time that I could start working, my father instilled into me very quickly, like, you make your own passage. And so it was one of those things that I was taught growing up, especially in the ideas of like independence and men. In relationships from my father, he always told me that a man should be able to take care of me and should never have to. And that was his way as a girl father to incentivize me to work, to make sure that my work ethic was strong, because he never wanted me to be stuck in a position of not being able to leave a bad relationship because I didn't know how to financially support myself. I didn't know how to take care of myself. Like, my dad taught me to be an amazing man. I'm not going to lie to you. Even as a woman, like, he taught me how to be a man. And I definitely feel the want growing up during that time to have a partner that he showed me, but it also instilled to me that not only am I hardened, but the person that's going to have to be with me is also going to have to be hardened. They're going to have to be stronger than I am. They're going to have to be more independent than my father made me. And in this generation, it's hard to find those types of people, right?
How did Mitchell and you meet for the first time? Did you guys know each other from school? Because I know he did. Like, tell me this.
That's actually wild because our paths crossed way before I met him, way before I actually knew him and introduced myself to Mitchell. He went to the same gym that my parents owned when he was like 16 years old. And there was an 8-year difference, almost 9-year difference. So I would have been 9, 8, 7 years old during that time. So it was mind boggling because obviously I wouldn't be scoping him. He wouldn't be scoping me. At that time, the age difference is so much that it wouldn't be anything more than just like seeing and like in a passing. You wouldn't even recognize it. You wouldn't even register. Like, why would he at 16 years old remember a 7-year-old little girl?
Right.
Except for the fact that I'm a 7-year-old running a cash register.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of noticeable, but at the same sense, it's not memorable for a romantic interest, you know? So it wasn't something that like we met as a childhood and like it developed or anything. I think that would have been weird. But to understand how we got from to Mitchell, because when I left Virginia with my best friend, I never even technically got divorced. We came to an agreement that we would stay married until it became an issue, just because it was a lot to go through.
Sure.
And so when I came back here, I'm working all the time. I'm tired. I'm forcibly making myself work because I want to stay busy, because I feel like I've already wasted so much time at this point. I feel like I've just really dropped the ball. So I've got a lot to catch up on. That's where my mindset is. And I'm going to this therapist to try to get back on track. I'm stressed out about my best friend, and I'm stressed out about moving back home. I'm stressed out about my mom. I'm stressed out about my life not being where I want it to be. I start going to this therapist, and they give me like a concoction of medicines. They've got me on mood stabilizers, Xanax, antidepressants, and like sleep medication all at the same time. And I'm expected to take multiple of these a day. Like, I'm supposed to take my antidepressant once a day, my Xanax 3 times a day, my mood stabilizer twice a day, and my sleep medication at night. Like, I was a walking zombie.
Wow.
And then you take into consideration, I'm already depressed. I'm working in the service industry now. I'm working in a restaurant. I'm a server. I turn 21 very shortly after I start drinking. I start bartending. I start drinking. I'm taking it to the max on this drinking. There is no in between. There's no social drinking. I mean, I'm going out almost every single night, and I'm spending $80, $90, even back in 2016, which was a lot of, like, I know that that's not a big difference from now, but in inflation and the cost of a beer for 10 years makes a big difference. Like, we're paying $2.50, $2.75 a beer back then, whereas now we're paying $4.25, $4.50, $6 for a beer. So to be able to rack up a $90 tab in just beer back then, that's impressive work for somebody of my size. At that point, I've lost all my muscle mass. I'd gotten really sick after I graduated high school, and I lost like 40 pounds in a matter of like 3 weeks. And they still never really told me what was wrong with me. Like, I went to the doctor because I feel like I'm going to have to, like, I'm bouncing all over the place here, but like, it's so relevant to how I felt in that moment, because you take me going from high school, and I'm so physically fit.
Right.
And in such a short period of time, I got sick, and I don't know what it was. And nobody knew what it was. And I was working at Sonic at the time, and I just stopped eating because every time I ate, I was sick to my stomach, and I couldn't hold anything down. I didn't know why. So I just quit eating. And I probably made it 2.5, 3 weeks without eating anything, period. Just not eating.
Jeez.
And so I went to work one night, and I was just having this really, really terrible like stomach pain. Obviously, I'm not eating, right? And I go like white, and my lips go blue, and I'm in the point of like passing out. I'm literally, I feel how sick I'm getting. So I go to the bathroom, and I was in so much pain that I was like curled up in a public bathroom, laying on the floor, puking my guts up. And it was just horrific. And I couldn't even like drive myself. Like they were going to let me leave, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do anything. And so I had to call somebody to come get me from work and take me to the hospital because I couldn't even drive my car. I was so bad. And I get there, and they ran about 12 hours worth of tests on me. And I mean, just every test that you can think of, blood work, x-rays, MRIs, GIs, just everything, CT scans. And the only thing we got back was that my white blood count was high. So they were telling me that my body was fighting something, but nobody knew what it was. Nobody had any idea why I was not eating, like why I was having a hard time eating, why I lost so much weight so rapidly, why eating was making me so sick. And so they gave me pain medication, they gave me nausea medicine, and they sent me home. And from that moment forward, I have struggled severely to keep weight on me. And I've had my thyroid checked. I've had all kinds of things checked on me to understand why when I stress out now, I lose a tremendous amount of weight. And I just don't get it. So I get back here, and I'm working, and I'm drinking an excessive amount because there's so much that I'm not happy with. I'm not happy with where my life is, career-wise, relationship-wise, fitness-wise, health-wise, family lifestyle, like where I live, like there was nothing that I was happy with, nothing. And so I started drinking a ton. And it was to the point that I was intaking 12 to 14 beers with 6 or 7 shots every single night.
Jeez.
And I'm a little person, so that should tear me up, right? Yeah. That should have me all over the place. I'm still walking and talking and driving myself home fine every single night after doing this. Like, that's how high my tolerance was. That's how much I was abusing this. Like, it was terrible. So many nights that I would like just absolutely black out. Don't even remember getting home. And I drove myself home. Like, what in the hell are you doing? What are you doing?
Are you still taking the medications
and
at the same time?
That was another thing. At the same time, I was taking the medication at the same time. So you also mix in that much drinking with Xanax and Seroquel and Ambien and Zoloft and
I mean, I'm not a
Prozac,
doctor or a medic or anything, but that doesn't sound like a cocktail for success, man. Like, that sounds like it's going to put you on the edge of...
Right. Yeah. And it's like everything hurts so bad. Like, I got to a point with all that medication that I just felt so numb, you know, and I just needed something to block out the numbness. And so I started adding more stuff to it. And I was just in this really bad place of drinking all the time and doing too much. And I was sad about everything. And I came across a guy, and it was not Mitchell. He was sitting outside of another bar that was very close to my restaurant that night. And immediately I was just drawn to him. And he didn't tell me he was military at first. So it wasn't like I was drawn to him because he was military. Like, what me and this guy had was very, very passionate, but it was also toxic. It was extremely toxic. We were very similar in those times. He was struggling with some of the things that he was going through with life. I was struggling with things that I was going through in life. We were so much alike in so many ways as far as our pessimism and our cynicalness and just the hatred for where we were in that moment, just frustration with life. So much of that it was like we were trauma bonding. And that's what made our relationship so toxic, is that neither one of us were bringing each other up. We were just constantly allowing each other to dive deeper into the deep end of like, what is fucked up, like our anger is feeding on each other. And even though like it feels so good in a way of like being able to share that with somebody, like it puts you in this mindset that you can't get out of that moment. You can't move forward, because that's part of what brings you together with that person, is that
shared trauma,
exactly.
That bond that you were talking about.
And being able to be pessimistic with somebody it feeds a part of your soul when there's somebody else that is equally pissed off at the world as you are. It really, really feeds into that want to talk to them, that want to like, yeah, man, like I'm mad too. Let's be mad together about this shit. And so like it ended up being that way. And at the beginning I think it was so intoxifying because we both knew, we were so aware that we were not in a place to be around each other. We were not in a place to have a relationship. And so it was never meant to be that. It was never meant to be something serious. He was very aware that he was only here for a year and he was getting ready to leave, that he had things going on in his life. And there was a lot of times that we talked right there in the beginning that we would end up somehow meeting up. He'd be out having a drink, and I would be smoking a cigarette, walking down the sidewalk to see if I could find him.
Right.
You know what I mean? See if he was going to sit there, because I didn't have his number. I didn't see him outside of that. Like the only interactions we had is when I would take a break, walk down to this other bar, and he'd be sitting outside having a drink. And I'd be like, oh, hey, you again. I'll pull out a chair, stick my feet up on the table and talk to you. Like I find you attractive. I know that you find me attractive, but we made it very clear, or at least he did, like, this is a bad idea. This would not work out well.
Right.
And so for a while he did push me away. And as somebody that was young, and it felt like something I couldn't have, right? It felt like you chase those things that feel just out of reach.
Sure.
And so I chased it hard. I was like so infatuated with this person. And I was like, I just want to be around this person because I feel like I can't, because I feel like it's a challenge to get there. It feeds my ego.
Sure.
That I could win this person over. And
the thrill of the hunt or the thrill of the chase, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like people definitely get attracted to that stuff. And so the more he pushed me away, the more I wanted to be with him and around him and talking to him. And it eventually ended up being one of those things that it just kind of developed like an oops situation. Like you're standing on the corner and like, I'm getting ready to leave and you shouldn't have kissed me, but you did. And now here we are,
right.
And it became a very, very passionate situation. Like it was what I described probably the most like overwhelming type of love that I've ever felt for somebody. It was such a trauma bond. And now looking back on it and knowing that we were trauma bonded in that way, like, it makes more sense because it felt like something you couldn't live without. It overtook every part of my mind. I was so caught on him. And I didn't even know that he was military at first by any means. Like, it wasn't until I went to his apartment for the first time. And again, this is 2015, actually. And so it's late 2015. And I saw, like, in his apartment where he had a picture. And, you know, a lot of times when you're in the military and you go from one place to another, everybody that's in your, like, team or whatever will sign a picture for you and send it on.
Sure.
You know, and it said, like, his name, and it said first lieutenant, whatever. And I was just like, and it was a couple years old too. It was a few years old. And so I was just like, if you were a first lieutenant then, like, the hell are you now? Like,
right.
And at this point, I know you're military. I did not know he was an officer. I did not know anything else about him. And so I'm like, what are you now? And he was like, oh, I'm a major, you know, and like that mind blew me in that moment because I'm still young. I'm like, oh God, now I feel extra young because I'm 21 years old and he was 12 years older than me. So that would have put him at like 33, you know, which didn't feel like a big difference until I had to realize this man had a full on career,
right?
You know, and I barely scratched the surface of being an adult. Like, I don't even have the idea. I don't even have the time frame of an entire career. Almost like his almost entire career was like my life.
Right.
You know, so that was crazy to like realize. And so I didn't know at the time. And he was very, very humble. He was not like a lot of officers that I met. He didn't talk about being an officer. He didn't talk about being in the military or anything. Like, eventually it did come out that he was special operations, but like, it wasn't something that he bragged about. You know, it wasn't. I've met a lot of officers. I've met a lot of military in general, and they're very boisterous. They're very confident. They're very in your face. Well, I'm an officer, or I'm an E6. I'm higher enlisted. I'm an NCO. You know, like, he wasn't about that at any means. He was just a person. He was that person that hated being thanked for his service. He was that person that hated being defined by his career. Like, he was just a person. And I loved every ounce of that about him. I truly did. Not outside of the fact that, like, I could just look up to him, you know, at that point of realizing that he was so successful. Like, this was somebody not only that I was extremely attracted to, but had a type of lifestyle that I aspired to have. He was a great example of something that I wanted. And so as we move forward, like, there's still that idea that he's leaving. We know that he's leaving.
Right.
And so we're bouncing back and forth. It's not what I would consider a monogamous relationship. So when I met Mitchell, I was still heavily involved with this other person that I had originally met downtown. But it wasn't serious. It wasn't in stone. It wasn't like talking to Mitchell was cheating on this guy or anything of that sort. Like, we were just in this position of like, we really enjoy being together. We really enjoy, even though we shouldn't. Like, it's very known that, like, this isn't going to last. This shouldn't be happening. We're not really doing anything but hurting each other here, but it's intoxicating and we're here for it. I mean, you only live once, right?
Mm.
So just go for it. Just enjoy the time that we have while we're here. And so as he's gearing up to leave, like, he's trying to kind of prepare me for that moment by like seriously backing off, by not wanting to be around me too much. And so that was very frustrating for me in that moment. And it kind of pushed me towards drinking more because, you know, like, here I am again, all the factors that considered. Now I've met this guy that I'm almost 100% convinced is like somebody that I should be with. I really want to be with, and deep down, like, I don't know how to make that happen, but it's just out of grasp. Like, how am I able to see this and experience it, but I can't have it? It almost pushed me even deeper into wanting to drink more, and then I left work one night and I stopped by this little bar that's the only bar that's open when I get off work. And I was just going to have a couple drinks, because that was my routine.
Right.
And sometimes I got off a little bit later, so I couldn't go to the usual bar that I would go to. And I'd have to find something that was going to be open for a little bit. And so I ended up going to this little bar right over the hole in wall by where I lived on the way home. And that was the first time that I saw Mitchell, was behind that bar, and he was bartending, and he was the worst bartender that you've ever seen in your entire life. He was so bad about it. He had Post-it notes all across the inside of the bar telling you how to make the most basic drinks. I'm surprised none of them had like vodka tonic and a lime on it. You know what I mean? Like, it was the most basic stuff, because he didn't really know how to bartend, but he was great with people. He was beautiful. Women loved him. Men loved him. Like, he is so good at talking to people and just being charming. And like, you want to talk to him. You want his attention. Men, women, didn't matter. Like, they wanted it. And so he made great money, and he had people all over him. And I didn't really think that I had a chance with him. Like, it wasn't something that I initially went in and was like, oh, I'm going to get that guy, Like, I studied it for a while. I would come in and get a beer, and then I would go play pool for a little bit. And I would just watch him bartend while I'm shooting pool. And I wouldn't even get my beer from his side of the bar. Like, you couldn't even get to his side of the bar. That's how crazy it was. Like, there'd be every woman in that bar was stacked up. Like, it was almost like they'd get up there, get their drink, and get back in line and start chugging their drink so they could get another drink. Almost constantly they wanted to talk to him, and you would see him rejecting these women left and right. Like, I remember ordering a drink from one of the other bartenders. It was a chick on the other side of the bar, and it was very easy to get a drink from her because everybody was stacked up on his side of the bar.
Wow.
And so I'd go over there and get a drink from her. And I remember hearing him one time, there was this female that kept like reaching over the bar and like trying to touch his hand and stuff. And I heard him in the background, and he like picks up this pen. He's like, I swear to God, I'm going to stab you if you touch me one more time. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay. So like, maybe we don't try to talk to this guy. Maybe he's kind of a dick, but like, he was very sure of like, he wanted to be there. He was making money, but he wasn't searching for a female. And you could tell that he wasn't searching for a relationship in there. He was literally just there to do his job. If he smiled at you and stuff, like, he's just being nice.
Right.
Just like any other bartender. And so I went through it a little bit, and we did this probably, it may have been like 3 or 4 visits that I went and didn't say a word. Didn't talk to him at all. Just quiet. And I didn't really talk to anybody. I wasn't very active. Like, I literally didn't say much of anything. I was so quiet when I got off work.
Well, it's the end of your night, right? So you're going in to just kind of unwind and get ready for bed.
Exactly.
And
like,
anytime you work nights, I mean, that's the thing. That is something about once it goes past after dark, if you're continuing to work, it's a really slow winding down period. At least that's how it happens for me. I mean, when we're reverse schedule or whatever, I cannot fall asleep. It's crazy. So anyway, that's your routine, right? You're trying to just wind down. You're not going out to party after work.
Right. I don't want anything that's going to bring my excitement back up.
Right. Excuse me.
You're okay. So one of the things that I really tried to do was just relax. And, as a bartender and a server, what I do all night is talk. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to them. I'm talking to the manager. I'm talking to the cooks, the bartender, or other bartenders, barbacks, customers. Like, I'm talking all night long. By the time I get off work and I'm having a beer and I'm shooting pool, I wish I would shut up. Like,
Right.
I'm so tired of hearing my voice. I don't want to hear it anymore. So I don't want to talk to anybody. So I'm obviously going to be more quiet. I'm a little bit more rough around the edges. I've had to fake this smile all night long.
Right.
By the time I get to the bar, it's resting bitch face. At this point, nobody's paying me to be nice to them anymore. And I've overextended the niceness that I have for the night. So I'm kind of gruff in there, and I'm shooting pool. I don't really talk to people. I just lay out quarters, and it's something that I'm really good at too. So I don't get knocked off pool tables. I walk away from them at this point in life. Like, I play all the time.
Challenge accepted. I hear it.
There's a lot of people that can't beat me in pool.
Okay.
And so Mitchell would watch me just like overtake this pool table. And one of the things that he said caught his attention about me is at this time I had really, really short hair. Like, it was like a pixie cut. And he doesn't like women with short hair. He's always liked women with long hair. And so the fact that I had short hair and he was so attracted to me, he said, made me stand out to him. And that was kind of like when he started to notice me, was me playing pool and just being this silent person. You also got to think, like, you look into these cameras, I've got really blue eyes, you know, and at that time I wore a lot of makeup. I had dark, heavy eyeliner, like really, really deep red lipstick. And so I was really defining those characteristics, you know, like my hair was very dark, like almost like a wine-ish red. And so it was noticeable. Sure. I stood out. And I noticed him starting to stare at me a little bit. Like, I would look over and he'd be looking at me and I'd be like, okay. And then one day I was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to say hi. That's what I'm going to do. And so before I left, I like balled up all my confidence and I walked over to the bar and I closed out. And I'm like, hey, can I close out? And he like closes out my tab or tells me how much I owe. I think I gave him cash. And I was like, okay, here's this. And I was like, I just stuck my hand out and I was like, I don't think I've met you. I'm Samantha. And I mean, I was probably shaking in my boots, but I know it just came off smooth as butter. I remember it. Like, nice. It was so smooth. And I was so proud of myself for it. And he looked over and he smiled kind of slightly at me and he leaned across the bar and he just shook my hand and he was like, hi, I'm Mitchell. You know, and that was, in that moment, it was like it stuck. That way that he said that, I'll never, ever, ever forget, like, that smile and him introducing himself like that.
Hey, what's going on, Team Trek family? Welcome back to another episode. In the studio tonight, we're bringing back Samantha. So we're getting into part 2 of her story. And without further ado, Samantha, welcome back.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So when we left him last time, you just made the bold move. Shaking in your boots and all, you walked up and you made your introduction. You met Mitchell, and let's pick it up from there.
Yeah. So initially, that is all the information that I got from that interaction was just his name. And just like any other female in that situation, I took my skills to Facebook and I stalked him, only slightly. But like a lot of guys during that time, he really didn't have too much on his Facebook, aside of the fact that he was kind of seemingly available. So I went ahead and slid into his DMs, as the kids say. And we talked for probably a few days before we actually agreed to meet again. And this wasn't necessarily like a date or anything. This was just another shift that he was working, and I was supposed to go hang out with him. But I was so nervous. So I actually pre-gamed only a tiny bit before I went. I went to one of my usual water holes and had a couple drinks before I went and sat with him. And that was probably about 8 p.m. when I left there and finally went and sat with Mitchell. And then we just talked for hours. That was where I figured out that he had been in the military and was recently divorced, just moved back into town. And a lot of these things were not only attractive, but kind of reassuring for me.
Okay, how so?
Because, you know, I was still technically married.
That's right.
And with him going through that divorce, that kind of put him, at least in my mind, to a way of like, he wasn't really ready for a serious relationship either.
Gonna take it slow.
Exactly. So I felt more comfortable with it being casual in the beginning. And that is pretty much exactly how we were for those first like 6 months. So that really happened late summer 2016. And all the way up until about New Year's, it was this game of like cat and mouse. You know, he chase, I run. Or the other way around, it just wasn't serious yet.
Okay.
And then all of that changed on January 4th, 2017.
Okay. What happened there?
So we had gone on probably one of our first dates. And we went and shot some pool. It was nothing crazy, nothing amazing. And we left there and we stopped at that same little bar that he used to work at. And we were just going to have like one more drink and go back to the house or wherever we were going to go. And when we left, I was under the impression that I was going home. And Mitchell was under the impression that I was going to his house. So when I didn't show up at his house, he started to worry. But the problem was I didn't make it home either. I actually got pulled over on the way, speeding slightly, and then I got a DUI.
Oh, no.
And when I got to that jail, I was still young. I'd never been in trouble, you know, but if there was one thing that I was sure of in life, it was that I had to be at work the next day, and I didn't want to get fired for not being there because I was in jail. So I used my one and only phone call to call out of jail, to call out of work.
You're kidding.
And the cops were a little beside themselves. But my excuse in that moment was, one, I don't want to lose my job. Somebody's got to tell them. And secondly, I just didn't know any other phone numbers. They took my phone from me. So, like, how was I supposed to call anybody to bail me out? I wasn't calling my parents. That was not an option. And so they pulled out my phone and they let me have another phone call, thankfully. And I called Mitchell, but somehow or another, he'd already figured out that I had been to jail, I guess. He was calling around because he really expected me to go to his house. So when I didn't show up, he was worried.
Okay.
And he bailed me out. He got my car out of impound and took care of me when I was so deathly ill. Mostly because of alcohol, but I'm pretty sure the water in there had something to do with it.
Probably not the best.
Right. And it was at that moment that I was like, you know what? This was one of our very first few dates. Like, this guy, he's got to actually care about me a little bit because nobody does this for a booty call.
Right. Sounds like a pretty good dude.
Right. And I needed to take advantage of that. I wanted to be able to give him that chance that I wasn't willing to give him and the time leading up to that. And so from that moment, I don't think that I ever actually went back home. I was always hanging out and staying with Mitchell from that point forward. And in my mind, even though I was living there, I still hadn't really accepted that I moved in you know? So when he tried to give me a key to the house, I still insisted that it stay outside. You know, this needs to be the spare key. He's like, no, you need to put it on your key ring. Because he was stubborn, you know, like if he wanted something, he was going to get it. And those were the first few times that you really saw that with the key. And then when he officially asked me to move in with him, I told him I couldn't because I didn't have a hairdryer. Which...
A hairdryer?
Yeah, I told him that my hairdryer was broken. And
sounds a little ridiculous, but okay.
It was any excuse that I could come up with to not be too serious. And that was just how it went down. But that was probably a few days before Valentine's Day. So on Valentine's Day, I woke up to a brand new hairdryer. Again, if Mitchell wanted it, Mitchell was going to get it.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. So from that point forward, I guess that's where we really started to consider ourselves like in a relationship, like a serious relationship. And now I'm to the point of like letting him in. I even went as far as like getting him a job closer to where I was working. So now he went from working this little bitty bar in like a small suburb town to a busier bar in a downtown area.
Gotcha.
And that put us like working and living together. And I realized really quickly, especially since I wasn't like really into PDA and he was, that he was like in my bubble. Okay. And I was getting quickly irritated. It seems so ridiculous, but I was just like, hey man, you know, you can like sit next to me and not touch me. You're the biggest guy in here. I assure you, no man in this place right now is trying to talk to me when you're sitting next to me. You don't have to be all over me. So we battled with that a little bit, and him being like overly affectionate and me not really being overly affectionate. And then he was offered his first stateside contracting job that his uncle called, and his uncle had been working there and he wanted to help get him into it.
Okay.
This put it to where now Mitchell was starting to work out of town. So instead of living together and working together in close proximity, now he's working in states that are nowhere close to me. He started out in Cherry Point, North Carolina, and Yuma, Arizona. We originally kind of talked about me traveling with him, but because of my DUI, I was not allowed to leave the state on a moving term. So we just had to kind of accept that if we were going to continue to be together, that we were going to have to make it work long distance, because this is what Mitchell wanted to do. And I supported him in that. We weren't at that point together long enough for me to even tell him that he wasn't allowed to do that.
Sure. Okay.
You know.
How long of a gap is there between you guys being able to see each other when he's having to travel and be out of town?
So when he first started with the stateside contracting, it was a duration of him being gone for 28 days, and then he would come home for 3. And he would typically try to line it up with the weekend. That way he would have 2 days at least worth of travel. Okay. And then there were a few situations where I would fly out to him wherever he was, mostly Yuma, Arizona.
Sure. But nevertheless, this is a big change from that being together all the time.
And it was, but it was honestly so good for our relationship because it gave me the ability to miss him, where I didn't like PDA before, or I felt like he was touching me too much. Now there was enough space there that when I was with him, I really enjoyed that stuff. Like, it kind of made us fonder. You know, they always say distance makes the heart fonder.
Yeah, true.
And so that really did help us. And when we did see each other, like, we traveled a lot. It made it to where those experiences together, we didn't want to waste them. Sure. So we weren't just sitting at the house. Like, if he was coming home, we were going to go to the beach or going to go down to Mississippi. Or if I'm going out to see him, we went to the Cayman Islands or down to Mexico or Grand Canyon, you know, like we took all these opportunities to be able to travel and make the most of our time. So it really was like a highlight. Even though we weren't able to be with each other as much as we wanted to be, those times that we were so special and so adventurous and so memorable.
Sounds pretty great.
Yeah, it was really nice. And then right around his birthday, actually the day before his birthday, in 2018, he proposed on a cruise that we were on. And of course I said yes, even though he started off with, I've thought of all the reasons of why I shouldn't marry you. And I was like, excuse me? But he was sweet. He followed it up, and then he goes, but I should have been thinking about the only reason of why I should, or all the reasons of why I should. However, he worded it exactly, but it was sweet.
Nice.
And I did say yes. And one thing that was like so special for that was my ring. Like my engagement ring was so different from my actual wedding set. And I'm an October baby. So our birthstone is opal, and I'm obsessed with them.
Okay.
And he was an April baby. So those are diamonds. And my engagement ring was an opal, an Ethiopian white opal, surrounded by diamonds. And it was to represent that he would always protect me. He was always surrounding me. It was like my wall, my barrier from the world was Mitchell. And it was so sentimental, so well thought through, so considerate.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that it was expensive. It was special.
Sure.
Originally, we'd planned the wedding for 2019. And I really didn't even care to have a massive wedding, but Mitchell, it was important to him that I had a wedding. And so that was when he was offered his first overseas contracting job. And I was okay with him doing that, even though it was going to put him in Afghanistan, which sounded terrifying in that moment. But it was diplomatic security, so he was still on the embassy. And it was something that he really wanted to do. And even though, I was a little irritated with how he told me that he was going to do it, because it was more like he was telling me instead of, trying to guide our life together. We're engaged at this point, so he should have been thinking about more than just making decisions, but also including me in those decisions. But one of the things that I told him was, now we got to move the wedding up. If you're going to do this, before you leave to start doing this overseas contracting, we're going to go ahead and be married. So we moved the wedding up to the end of that year, which would have been December 3rd of 2018. And that wedding was done on the fly. And Mitchell pretty much organized the entire wedding. He did a really great job of it. But most of the time when you have a wedding, you have a bridezilla. And typically you would expect it to be the bride, but it wasn't me. Mitchell was the bridezilla, but he did everything. He set it up. He did all the decorations. He ordered everything. He planned everything, made all the invitations. He was really just so determined to give me such a beautiful day that he thought I deserved. And we got up there, and that wedding, anything and everything that could go wrong absolutely did.
Oh, no.
So you start off in the beginning. It's early December. We get there to set up for the wedding, and there's already there's 3 little old ladies that are setting up for a Christmas party. And Mitchell's right there in the beginning. He's irritated. He's like, no, I paid for this venue. You're going to need to take all this down because I'm about to set up for a wedding. So when you walked into my wedding, the first thing you saw was this massive 12-foot Christmas tree that we couldn't do anything about. Oh. But it was fine. Yeah. Again, just blow past it. And then we lost the ring bearer. The flower girl didn't show up. The makeup girl didn't show up. The officiator didn't show up. We messed up doing the pictures. We should have done them before the ceremony, but we ended up doing them after. So the lighting was all off. I forgot my bouquet. I ripped my dress.
Oh, wow.
Like, there was so much chaos in that day. But I can honestly say that almost every photo that I have from my wedding day, we are laughing. We're smiling. And we're never going to forget those days. Nobody that was involved in that beautiful disaster will forget how that wedding went down and all the chaos that was involved. And really, most of it was only obvious to us, you know. To everybody else, it may have been a little off, but it wasn't crazy. And then that night, we had the reception. And one of the things that Mitchell was really into is, like, he loved Jameson. And so we had a Jameson fountain. And we refilled this Jameson fountain 7 times. Like, literally, we bought all of the liquor, like little local liquor stores. They didn't have any more Jameson to even buy. And during our bachelor and bachelorette party, Mitchell's best man got a little too toasty. So Mitchell really didn't get to enjoy himself during his bachelor party. He just ended up taking care of him. But he sure made up for that at the reception. After everything had gone wrong at the wedding and it was all said and done, it was time for him to cut loose. Okay. And he did. By 9:30 p.m., he was full on asleep in one of his groomsmen's lap.
No.
And I lost my cigarettes in the process of trying to get him out of the door. We had to have 4 of his groomsmen take him to the car, put him in the car. He is passed out. And now I can't find my cigarettes, but I'm not that worried about hunting through everything to try to find them. I know that if I pull out, I can take a left, go to the gas station, grab a pack, head back home.
Sure.
But when you come out to this main intersection, it's left to the gas station, right to home. Mitchell wakes up as I'm taking this left-hand turn, and I guess he immediately thinks I'm out for an insurance payout. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but he freaks out. He's like, this isn't the way home. Opens the door. Going 55 miles per hour down the road. I reach over, grab him by his little vest, and I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing right now? And he's like, oh, this isn't the way home. I need air. And I'm like, window. We can roll the window down. We do not need to open the door. Like, I've also had a couple of drinks. I really don't want to go to jail tonight. Let's chill. We get the cigarettes. We head back over to the house. Now I'm struggling to even get him out of the car because for whatever reason, Mitchell thinks that he can accomplish this by only moving his right leg. Left leg, there's no movement there.
Wow.
So now I'm arguing with him like, babe, if you want to get out of this car, that left leg, I swear to God, it's going to have to move. And I finally get him to, like, at least to the point that I can, like, help him out of the car. But he's a foot taller than me and he's got 100 pounds on me, easy. So you could just imagine me, and I'm strong, but, like, still, that's a lot of dead weight to carry. And I'm trying to help him up to the door. We get up there. There's a little column in front of the door. So I just, like, sit him in front of it. I'm like, all right, hold on to this. And he is, for dear life, holding on to this column. I fumble around and get the keys in the door, get him all the way to the back bedroom, start undressing him. We get him all the way down to his pants. And all of a sudden, like, he snatches away from me and he looks at me and he goes, no, I sleep in these. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Go to sleep in those then. And so we go to sleep. This is probably about 10 p.m.
On your wedding night?
On our wedding night, yeah. He's trash, total. That's the end of the night, for real. About 2:30 a.m. rolls around, and I'm suddenly awakened. First, I hear the dog yelping. Then it feels like I'm being crushed. I cannot breathe. I don't know what's going on. And just as I open my eyes, I'm hearing this loud smack. But I take a second to process, and I realize that it's Mitchell slamming his head up against the wall. And so I look over and I'm just like, damn, babe, are you okay? And he was like, yeah, I really got to get these pants off. And so
what's with the pants?
Yeah, exactly. The same pants that I tried to get off of him. But I looked at him and I was immediately, you couldn't get off on your side of the bed. You had to steamroll me and the dog. Poor dog don't even understand what's going on. To accomplish this. And it was just funny to go through. All right. And then we fast forward October of 2019, and we're getting ready to go to Ireland. We're looking at buying this brand new house, and things are like starting to fall back into place. But Mitchell does start to talk about like wanting to be back home, wanting to try to work at home, because no matter what he's doing through these contracting jobs, it just isn't quite filling that void that he thought it was going to. As close as it is to the military, it's not the military for him.
Sure. Okay.
And we go to Ireland for my birthday trip, and it's amazing. It was beautiful. During this time, we were also trying to close in on this new house that we were trying to buy. And Mitchell gets a phone call while we're in Ireland that he's being laid off from his job, which is scary, but almost like fate, because he had been talking about trying to get out of it. So we accept it. Somehow or another, we still ended up getting the house, and he quickly found another job. It wasn't anything that he really liked in the beginning. It was just a warehouse position, but it was a start.
Okay.
And through that first year, things were good. Like, we had the small issues, the little fighting of relearning how to live together, because we have gone from essentially the first 3 years of our relationship only being in the same room maybe 3 months total to now being in the same house every single day. And we're having to relearn how to be with each other again. And it comes with its own struggles, but it was never anything so serious that we couldn't work it out or any real big blow-up fights. It was more like, you didn't load the dishwasher right, or the laundry got left in there and now we've got to rewash it. You know, those normal marriage fights that you deal with.
Sure.
So things were getting a little bit more heated, but it was nothing to be really concerned about. We were making it. And that's when COVID hit. And now, not only are we learning how to live to each other with the same house, but we're stuck in the same place 24/7. Everybody was feeling that closeness and that frustration with the people that they were living with.
Oh, absolutely.
But even still, during this time, I think we accepted that we weren't going to have children anymore. We originally bought this house, and it was 2,800 square foot. So it was massive for two people, but we weren't 100% sure if we were going to try to have children at this point when we bought the house. And now, as COVID's hitting, something about it and the way the economy is going makes us realize that, like, we're really not ever going to be able to afford to have children with the fertility issues that we were experiencing. It was on his side and mine. I had endometriosis, endometriosis, and PCOS, and I was going through, at this point, laparoscopies to help treat that. They were supposed to last 5 to 10 years, but they weren't for me. So it was a never-ending struggle. And doctors told me that, like, I could have children, but it was never going to be an oops kind of situation. And Mitchell couldn't have children at all. That's why his previous marriage had failed. And I think kind of why he really pushed to try to get me to stick around. He really wanted to help with things. And in the beginning, when I was pushing away, he was trying so hard to, like, grab onto me because he was feeling that abandonment from that part of his previous marriage. And so we got to this point where we accepted we're not going to have children anymore. And there's no need for us to have a house this big. And somehow or another, we stumbled onto the idea of moving into a camper. And again, when Mitchell had something set in his mind, he was going to do it. And there was no real afterthought to it. There was no real expansive decision-making skills. It was just, we're on it, 1,000-0. So within a week of this conversation of we're going to sell the house and move into a camper, we had sold the house and bought a camper. And we put this camper about 200 yards from this little bar. I mean, you could walk there in 2 minutes and back in 10 because the difference was staggering, literally. And as much fun as that started out being, it very, very quickly turned into both of us drinking way too much. And when Mitchell came back originally from this overseas contracting, he had already started to drink a little bit more than normal. Originally, when he started doing it, like, he wasn't even allowed to drink when he was gone. During those 3-month rotations, because he was diplomatic security, like, they didn't allow them to drink. So when he came back home, those 1 to 2 drinks a night almost quickly started to become a bottle a night. And at one point, I did stop and try to say something to him about it, but he had every excuse in the book. And again, this was right around COVID that he was being laid off. And I think everybody around was struggling with alcohol. So it didn't seem abnormal when you were watching it happen all around you. And on top of that, I knew that Mitchell dealt with physical pain. And that's part of the reason that he got out of the military. And he had told me about that at this point. I knew, we'd been together for a few years, and I had found out that, like, he was medically retired. He didn't just get out after his time. He was involved in an injury in Afghanistan back in 2012, where he came back here and he ended up having to have back surgery. And he had his three lower discs fused back together, which caused him a tremendous amount of physical pain that he dealt with all the time. So that was just another thing that he made the excuse of drinking. Well, I don't like being on these painkillers that the VA is giving me. They're not willing to help me any other way. I keep calling and trying to figure out different methods of help, and I'm just not getting any relief. So this is what I need to do. And that was, in that moment, I had to try to convince myself to, like, brush it under the rug. Trying to convince myself that, like, he's a big guy, he can handle it, Up until that point in time, he never had any issue with alcohol. That was obvious. He was able to put it down when he needed to. He wasn't over drinking until he came back home. So it was one of those things that I accepted. I didn't really understand drinking in moderation at that time, because when I was growing up, my parents didn't really drink. It was always my grandparents who drank too much, or my parents that didn't drink at all. So I didn't know what moderation was.
Okay.
And then we moved into that camper right next to the bar, and it was just like, from both sides, the drinking got even more extreme. And because we didn't want to be stuck in that itty bitty little camper all the time, we spent way too much time at that bar, almost encouraging each other to drink. And this started making those itty bitty little fights that were over trivial things a lot more. And I could tell, or at least start to tell, that Mitchell's drinking for his pain and fun now started to turn into Mitchell drinking because he was irritated. You know, at this point, now he's switched jobs like 3 times. And now he's working with an ambulance. He was driving the ambulances at this point. And he thought that was going to be really exciting. He thought that was going to house all of that adrenaline that he had been chasing, that he thought was going to give him some type of meaning.
Fill that gap.
Right. And it just ended up being another thing that fell short. And so he was getting to a point where he was really frustrated. He was frustrated with work. He was frustrated with his pain. That's when I really started getting involved in the VA and calling them and trying to advocate for him. And I started to see just how complicated it really was for him to get general care for anything. I had to fight tooth and nail just to get him an MRI on his neck after I would wake up to him like beating his hands on the dresser because he was just feeling so much pain. And even though I was realizing in that moment that this was becoming much bigger than simple daily frustration, I still attributed a lot of his anger and shutdown in those times, specifically that time, to me. Even though he was trying his best to explain to me that it wasn't me, that it was the physical pain, that it was the frustration with where he was in life and everything like that, like, because he was so good with this facade of making everything seem okay in public, being able to go out and joke around with friends and laugh and stuff. And then I had to watch him literally change within an hour's time, get to the house and completely shut down. Like, that made me feel like I was the reason. That made me feel like I was really causing that frustration. I couldn't hear what he was trying to say to me in those moments. And that made me drink more too. And when we started drinking together heavily and being too close and those frustrations building on both sides, like, our arguments just got worse and worse. And it felt like it was building up. And then one night I came home a little later than normal from work. It was about 3 a.m. and Mitchell wasn't there yet, which made me really concerned because he normally would have been home. He normally would have been asleep by like 9 p.m. So, like, where are you? Now I'm freaking out because is he in a ditch somewhere? Like, what's going on? And I tried calling him. He didn't answer. I'm freaking out. And finally, about 3:30, about 30 minutes after I get there, he comes stumbling in the door and he is just trashed. And of course, I'm irritated. You know, I'm pissed off at this point because it's not even that you're out. It's not even that you need permission to be out. It's the consideration level of like, I'm worried about you. You should have let me know, you know? And so I did come at him kind of aggressively.
Okay.
And somehow or another, this fight turned into me kind of like pushing out all of that emotion of feeling like I was causing these feelings within him. And I remember yelling at him, just being like, it doesn't feel like you love me anymore. And in that moment, I knew that was not true. I knew that he loved me, but I wasn't lying when I said that it didn't feel like he did, because he wasn't trying to put anything into our relationship. He wasn't calling me beautiful. He wasn't calling me to see how my day was going. He wasn't trying to plan date nights. He wasn't hanging out and talking with me. You know, it really seemed like any time that it was just me and him, he was so irritated, like he didn't want to be around me, like I was doing something to him. So I called him out on it. And it really sent him through the roof. Like, he immediately grabbed his stuff. He went right back out the front door, and he went over to a friend's house, and he stayed the night over there. And that next morning, I got up. I went over to that friend's house. I begged him to come out front and talk to me, and he refused. Like, he wouldn't even talk to me. Like, I couldn't understand in that moment how that one statement had drove him so far. And so I went back to the camper and I just waited, let him cool off. And he finally showed up about 4 p.m. and he sat down and he was just very matter of fact. He didn't want to have a conversation or anything of that sort. And he started off with, I got an apartment, which just completely threw me. Sure. Because it hadn't been 24 hours since our argument. Right. What do you mean you got an apartment? And he started to just state it out. Like, I'm going to move into this apartment. You're going to stay here in this camper. We're going to continue to work on things, but I need some space. I cannot believe you would say this to me. I think we need to reevaluate some things. And I was shattered. I was so caught off guard. I didn't understand, but I was terrified to push him away further than I already did. So I didn't want to argue. Nonetheless, I just agreed, and I remember that first week, I ended up calling out of work several times. I just laid in bed. I was just so distraught over this decision that was made almost 100% without me. Even though it affected me to such an extreme level, I felt so left out, like I didn't matter. My opinion didn't matter. How I felt didn't matter. Like, I was just trying to express what I needed, and it was being thrown in my face. And so I was frustrated, and I was heartbroken. Sure. And I will say those first few months, that was really difficult. We had to come up with, our own rules of engagement for this. You're not going to see other people. We're going to try to plan 1 or 2 date nights a week and really just work on some expectations and boundaries. And it took me a second to realize that this could really be a good thing for us because I was so hurt by it. Okay. And I will say that those first few they were tough. There was a lot of arguments, a lot of back and forth. But by about the 3rd or 4th month, we had started to get to a point that we enjoyed being around each other again. And I quit drinking as much, which absolutely helped with some of the fights. Okay. But Mitchell never really did. And while it wasn't causing fights per se in that moment, it definitely wasn't helping us resolve anything that he was choosing to continue to drink as heavily as he was. We also had a massive transition of like, this is when Mitchell, right before we separated, decided that he was going to start his own business. So while he kept bouncing all of these jobs up until this time, he couldn't quite find anything that he really liked. And even when he did, he struggled a lot with management and leadership because he was always trying to perfect something. He was always trying to make things better. And he never really could quite get people to listen to him. That was very frustrating for him. So right before we separated, he decided that he was going to start this construction business. And that was something that he was really good at. Like, when we had our house before we sold it, we had turned the garage into like this full-on game room and built a pergola. And he had gone over, and at one point he was helping a friend with fixing a sink. And then before I knew it, he was sending me a picture of like a completely gutted out kitchen. Because, that's just kind of how he was. But that was really the project that made him realize that, like, hey, I really enjoy doing this. So it was very new, but it was also just another transition that we were going through in that time. Just another stressor, another frustration that we were dealing with. And he's in this apartment. He's starting out this business, and we're struggling pretty hard. So things are tough. But after a few months, he starts to get more comfortable. The business is doing all right. We're getting to where we like being around each other again. But he's not on the best side of town. So his truck's been broken into twice at this point.
Oh, shit.
His work trailer's been broken too. He's lost probably $3,000 worth of equipment within a 2-month period. And at that point, we decided, we've got to get you out of this apartment. We got to get you back on this side of town. And we're starting to do better. So as we're looking for a house for him to rent, we've decided that we're going to try to live together again. But we're dead set in the fact that we can't go back to this camper. It was too chaotic. It was too close to the bar. It bred too many fights. And we needed to be able to have a new space, a new place to kind of create a new beginning.
Sure.
So we move into this house in Millbrook. And for the first time since Mitchell started coming back, since Mitchell came home in 2019, it really feels like our relationship is starting to flourish again. Like, we're really enjoying being with each other, and the business is doing well. We started golfing together, actually.
Nice.
And that was just one of those things that, like, neither one of us are really good at it. We just both started. So it was something that we could enjoy doing. It just gave us one of those activities to really get back to things that we liked about each other.
Sure.
We were, at that point, we had struggled to find things that we really enjoyed doing and enjoying our time with each other. So this felt like a very positive time in our life. And I think that entire first year was pretty great. We had a couple of little here-there fights, but our time apart really did help us. And then about a year after that, the drinking really started to curve over again. He really started to drink more again. It was becoming obvious that he was hurting. And a lot of that branched from him just pushing himself too hard. He quickly realized, as he was getting more jobs in more frequently, that he thought that he could accomplish these jobs quicker than he could. And he also struggled a lot with finding good help. For whatever reason, like, he never really could get people to stay consistent. They just didn't have the same work ethic that he did. But because he expected him out of other people, it was throwing him behind. Now he's going in and he's quoting jobs. Oh, it's going to take me 2 weeks to do this job. But because the other people aren't working as hard as he is, it ends up taking 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. And now he's losing money on that. And that's causing a little bit of a frustration too. So now he's losing money. He's constantly misjudging these jobs. It's not the work that he's struggling with, but the business side of it.
Right.
And that's causing him to drink a little bit more again. And just like before, he starts to shut down a little bit more. And I assumed again that this kind of had to be me, you know, and I was trying to fix it. I was trying to tell him to slow down. He didn't really want to listen to me, but it just caused little arguments here and there. And then one evening we were out to dinner, and I remember during this time, for whatever reason, like, I was picking up on all these little lies that I wasn't even sure why they were being told to me, but I was seeing them. And one of the ones that he had told me was that he was going to shut off his personal phone. So he had gotten this business office right down the road. And when he got internet in there, they gave him the option to get a business phone. Okay. So he got this business phone, but he wasn't really into like the social media and things of that such. So he was like, well, if I'm going to have this business line, there's no point in me having a personal line. Okay. So he explained to me that he was going to transfer everything over to this business line. So for a while there, he had 2 phones. Not an issue. Non-starter for whatever reason. And he told me about 2 weeks prior to this dinner that he had cut off that personal line. So when we went to dinner that night, that old line started ringing. And I made a mental note of it, but I still didn't call him out on it just yet. Okay. And afterwards, we went to shoot some pool with some friends at the Little American Legion right across the street. And I don't remember how we started arguing, but he had said something to me, and it irked me. It got under my skin. It was just mean in whatever way he decided to say it. And so I came back at him, and I was talking about the phone at that point. I was just like, oh, kind of like this phone you said you cut off, but you actually didn't. And immediately, like, that was a trigger for him. He did not like being called out on lying about that. Sure. So he gave me just this awful look, went straight up to the bar, closed out, was like, whether you're coming or not, I'm leaving. So we get in the car, we leave. It's really only like a 2-minute drive back to the house, but we are screaming at each other the whole time because he's mad that I brought it up in front of people, and I'm mad that I've been lied to. Sure. You know? And it wasn't that I would have been upset that the phone was still on. It was just the fact that I didn't understand why. He had told me that it had been cut off when he didn't. And then he tried to tell me in the car that he never said that he had it cut off, which only frustrated me more. So I started pulling out every little lie that I had noticed, everything that I brushed under the rug that felt so seemingly unimportant to draw attention to, things that I just kind of overlooked. I started pulling them all out. because the way that he was overreacting in that moment, it was so frustrating for me. And I felt like I was being attacked. So I felt the need to defend myself. And when I did that, I was trying to force him into accountability for things.
Okay.
But he blew it way out of proportion. Instead of taking responsibility for those instances, he blew up. And just like he did the first time, he just started making decisions. And he told me, you know what? I'm going to move into my business office, and you're going to move in with your parents, and we're going to get rid of the house, and this is just what we're going to do. And I was baffled because I'm almost 30 years old. I have no intention of moving it back in with my parents. But I just didn't understand how that one fight had made it blow up so fast. You know, like it really felt like there was an extreme there. But I also wasn't completely surprised because we'd already been through this once. You know, and I figured, you know, he'll come around just like he did last time.
Sure.
We're gonna work on this. Maybe he doesn't mean it in such a serious way. We just need to take another step back. So we go inside, and he packs him a little bag, and he goes over to a friend's house. So within like 2 days, we had this entire house cleaned out. And Mitchell had set up a place at the office for him to stay. And even though he was convinced that he was going to push me over to my parents, I had no intention whatsoever of moving back in with them at almost 30 years old. So I called my best friend and I was like, hey, can I please stay with you? I just need a room to rent. Which, of course, she said yes. So I moved in with her. And as we went forward, like, I really assumed that Mitchell was going to want to work on this. But that was kind of what felt like in that moment the nail in the coffin. Because when I would go and see him at the business, at this point, like, he kept telling me, like, I'm done. This is it. We need to figure out how to separate things because I'm not changing my mind. We can't fix this. We're having the same arguments over and over again. It's obvious that we're never going to agree about this. We're never going to come to terms. And he is, like, encouraging me to move on over and over again, which I couldn't understand. And I'd already planned at this point to have a full hysterectomy in May. And this was March of 2024. So I was only like 3 months shy of this hysterectomy. And if we were going to get divorced, I wasn't going to be able to, one, afford the hysterectomy or be able to afford the follow-up care. And I explained that to him. So he did agree that he would continue to stay married to me because, as he said, if we were to get divorced, like, he was done. He wasn't worried about being with anybody else. And leading up to that surgery, we went through a lot of back and forth of kind of like talking, but not really talking. We would touch base, but it wasn't. This was the first time in our entire relationship that we weren't talking every single day. That when we were talking, everything just felt dry and cut. Like there wasn't any depth or emotion to anything that was going on between both of us. And when I had that surgery, I begged Mitchell. I was like, look, I'd really like it if you were there. You know, I know we're not in the best place right now, but like, I'm scared. This is a terrifying thing for me to go through before I'm even 30 years old. And so he did agree to go up there with me, and he stayed through the surgery. So after I got out of the hospital from my hysterectomy, it was like seeing a more tender side of Mitchell again. And obviously with having that hysterectomy, like there was no real like physical intimacy that would be allowed with us at that time. So it really gave us that moment to be intimate with each other on a much more deeper meaning, on a non-physical aspect. And I feel like in that moment, that was a really good thing for our relationship, to not have that crutch of it just being physical, or trying to relate that physicalness to emotion. Like everything that we were going through in that moment was very strictly emotional. But because I had gone through that hysterectomy, my body was going through like a shock menopause, which put me in a position of like my emotions being all over the place. I couldn't necessarily figure out how to process things at times. And Mitchell was still drinking. So where the arguments were starting on his end from alcohol, they were starting on my end from hormones. Sure. And we just got to where we were, again, arguing with each other. But at this point, Mitchell was really being down on himself. He was watching his business fail. He was watching our relationship fail. And he himself was just so irritated and mad all the time. And I remember sitting there at the house one evening, and I'd gotten this message from Mitchell, and all it said was I had found a way out. And I'd never received anything from him like that before. He had never made any threats to his own life or insinuated that he was ever going to do anything like that. But I could tell in that moment that it was different. I could tell that it was something was off.
Okay.
So I jumped in the car and I rushed over to him, and I called him on the way, and he did answer, but he was really out of it. And he either wasn't going to tell me or couldn't tell me what was going on. But I could tell that it probably had something to do with alcohol or prescriptions or something of that sort, because he said I found a way out, and then he still answered the phone. Like, I knew it had to do something with that. And he sounded really out of it. So I hung up the phone with him, accepting that I wasn't really going to get an answer. And I just immediately called 911. And I told them that I needed them to meet me at the office. And I still somehow beat them there by probably 10 minutes. Or at least it felt like that in that moment. It was like every second felt like forever. But when I arrived, Mitchell was completely unresponsive. You couldn't get him to talk to you. You couldn't get him to open his eyes. He was breathing. I checked his pulse. He was alive, but completely just out of it. And so I remember trying to force him to sit up and shaking him violently and screaming at him to wake up and talk to me. And I couldn't get anything out of it. And about 5 minutes afterwards, the ambulance showed up. And then the police showed up. And right around the time that they were trying to check Mitchell's blood pressure, they're putting the little cuff on his arm, something happened. And I guess his body went into survival mode, or he got that jolt of adrenaline trying to force him to stay alive. And he sat straight up, and his eyes shot wide open, And he was just immediately erratic, immediately screaming for everybody to get out. And that if anybody had a gun, they weren't allowed to be in there. So it was almost like he didn't even understand what was happening. I was trying so hard to calmly talk to him and explain to him, you understand that they can't do that. You understand that they have to be here. And this is what's happening. But I'm sure it didn't come off as calmly as I thought it did, because my adrenaline was pretty high. I was shaking, I was freaked out.
Sure.
He argued for a minute. They told him, you're going to have to go. It is what it is. You can go voluntarily, or we can force you to go. So as Mitchell was being voluntold that he's going to go to Baptist South on a mandatory hold, the one thing that I was really concerned about was getting his glasses and his socks to him. I don't know why, that was just something that he was talking about. So I was pretty persistent about making sure that happened. And I went up to the hospital. I dropped that off. Obviously, at that time, they weren't going to let me see him. His blood alcohol was insane at 0.39 when he got there, which is almost organ failure. This is an extreme amount of alcohol in his system. And he has to go through everything that he had to do, like the charcoal and everything that they did to treat his alcohol poisoning. And it took about 2 days before they actually got him into a mental health facility where they were going to put him on a undetermined amount of time that he had to be there. And when I talked to him, I only talked to him once before he actually made it over there. And he was not pleased with me. But when he finally got to the mental health place, it probably took about 72 hours before I was actually allowed to see him or visit him. And when I showed up to that first visit, I was pretty terrified. Mostly because I knew that he was not thrilled with my decision to call the hospital and stuff. I'm sure he thought that he could have handled it on his own, or that we could have handled it. And on the other end of that, I was really anxious to get to him because I needed to know that he was okay. Sure. So I had very, very mixed emotions going to visit him for that very first time. And when I got there, he looked defeated, but he wasn't mad. He didn't seem mad at me. And when he sat down originally, he thanked me probably 2 or 3 times for saving his life. But there was some part of him that I could see that was not happy about it. And he didn't say it, but I could tell that he didn't want to live past that moment. He truly didn't think that he was going to make it through that, and he didn't want to be saved. So it was kind of haunting, but we got him through there, and that was really the first time when we were sitting there in that little visiting area that Mitchell was able to admit to me that he had an issue with alcohol. And it was relieving to hear that, because that was the first time that we were really both that we were on the same page, that this was probably the biggest part that we were dealing with, was this alcoholism. And he pulled out this little book, and on this copy paper, he had wrote out all of the functions of the day, the schedule, and who was doing their job, who's not doing their job, who's following the rules, who's not following the rules. And he wanted me to hold on to this, because while all these doctors and psychiatrists that he was talking to that talked to me told me that he was the most respectful and polite patient that they had. It was pretty obvious that this was like a guide, or it was pretty obvious that this was like a guise that he was putting on to ensure that he could get out quicker, because what he was saying about them was extremely different. And it was obvious from the notes that he was taking and the schedule that he was trying to form. But what caught my attention, and one of the things that he talked about in that visitation, was the flip side of that piece of paper that he had wrote everything down on. And it was all about moral injury. And this was the first time that Mitchell had really ever said anything about moral injury to me, or that he even knew what it was. And he didn't really go in depth into it in that moment. He was just intent on like, this is it. This is the problem, you know? And I didn't quite understand it outside of the way that it sounded. And relating it back to what he was going through, like, it did make sense as far as like the basic explanation of like your moral confliction. But I still, at that moment, I didn't really get it. And while we're sitting there, we're talking about the moral injury, we're talking about his drinking, and coming to the realization that like he does have an issue with his drinking and his drinking problem. He promises me, he's like, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to quit doing it for us. I want us to be together. I want us to be able to get through this. And I know that this is what I have to do. And I did tell him during that time that like, if you're going to quit drinking, I will support you, but you can't do it for us. This is something that you're going to have to do for you. And he was accepting of that. And as Mitchell was getting ready to get out of this facility, there were certain things that had to happen, like the doctors and the therapists calling me to confirm that he was going to be with me in my care, things of that such. And the doctor, I remember her asking me, she was like, how are you going to ensure that he takes all of his medication? And I just told her, I was like, I can't, you know? And that's just the truth of it. This is a grown man. And if he's going to do this, he has to do it for him.
That's right.
Not you or I or any doctor can force him to do what he's supposed to do. And I told him exactly the same thing when I picked him up. You know, I'm going to support you. And if you're willing to get sober, then I absolutely do want to try to work on our relationship. But I can't force you to get help. I can't force you to get sober, and you can't do it for me or for us. You have to be able to do it for you. You have to want to be better. That's the only way that we're ever going to move forward in this. Because if you're basing your drinking and not drinking on our relationship, then any single time that we get into an argument, your sobriety is going to go into threat.
Sure.
It's going to teeter on our relationship, and it's just not going to be good for either one of us. So we were in agreement that he was going to try to be better. He was going to quit drinking. He was going to make that valiant effort to not just cut back like he said he would over the years, but to actually quit drinking and try to get to a place to where we could really work on our relationship and work on some of the issues that he was dealing with on a deeper level and what was driving him to drink in the first place. And he was finally willing to try to have those conversations with me. While I had experienced some of it through like PTSD episodes or an over intoxication where he started to talk about it, there wasn't a whole lot that I really knew about the struggles that he was dealing with when it came to the after effects of war that he was involved in. Because Mitchell was a grunt. He was an infantry rifleman, which means boots on the ground. He saw wartime. He saw really extreme bad things that you're just not really supposed to see as a person. And he I wouldn't say he was forced to do things, but he was put into positions where he was forced to make decisions that were surrounded around self-preservation, which meant his life or somebody else's. And ultimately, he made the decision of his life. There were a few times that he talked about that, and it never really seemed like it was the number in general that bothered him, because I don't think you could have actually asked Mitchell how many men he had killed and he could give you an answer. But he could give you an exact number to how many women and children. That haunted him. He knew about that. And in ways, like, he commonly talked about the fact that he couldn't have children, even though that was due to an infection from the injury that he was sustained. He fully thought that that was a punishment. He thought that because he was put in a position of having to eliminate children, that God was punishing him, and that's why he couldn't have children. That's why we weren't allowed to have children. And he struggled with that a lot. Those were little things that I didn't really notice until after we had been through that situation, that these were things that outside of like passing of saying, they really were like weighing on him every single day. It was to a much more extreme level than he talked about or that I even understood in that moment. So coming out of the hospital for him, like, he did think that things were going to get better, you know, and it seemed that way for me too. Like, he came out, and this was the first time in probably 5 years that he didn't have alcohol in his system. He wasn't drunk or tipsy or hungover or feeling the after effects of it. Like, he was just completely sober, and he looked rejuvenated. Like, all those issues, he's finally starting to be able to get a little bit of sleep. And I do remember him complaining about without the alcohol, he was having a little bit of a harder time going to sleep at night. But when he was sleeping, he was getting more restful sleep. So he was starting to feel a little bit better, and he was going to the gym again. So his confidence was going back up a little bit. And when he called me and messaged me, we were back to talking every day. Like, he wanted to call me and tell me about his day. And that felt really good. It felt like he wanted to talk to me. Like, he was, not only that he wanted to talk to me, but he wanted to talk in general. He wanted to have upbeat conversations again. It wasn't just, oh, woe is me and life is frustrating and work fucking sucks. You know, it was, this went well today, and I'm happy with how this happened. And like, he was laughing again. And it really felt like we were putting such a bad part of our relationship in the past. It really felt like we were making strides. But at that point, I had been through so much with him. My mental health had struggled through his first attempt and through all of our arguing, that like, I just didn't trust moving right back in with him. Like, it was terrifying to me because the rug had been essentially ripped out from underneath me so abruptly twice at this point. I was very hesitant to just like jump right back into it, on top of the fact that I really wanted him to focus on his sobriety. I didn't want to put that pressure of trying to fix our relationship. So I was trying to keep our relationship light after his first attempt. But I was under the impression that we were working on it. And things were going well. And we were starting to feel happy again. And I think we made it to almost a month of Mitchell being sober before I started noticing at work that, like, I was getting those troubling texts again. I was starting to get weird messages that just seemed like they were kind of starting fights for no reason. And when I got home at night, like, he was just completely passed out. There was no remnants of, like, me waking him by accident. There wasn't him waking up bright and early in the morning. I could tell that he was getting a little groggier and irritable in the mornings. So there were, like, little signs that he was slowly slipping back into drinking. But at the same time, I did realize that, like, he was going through such an immense change at that time, and he was still trying to cope with everything that he was dealing with. So I gave a little bit of leeway, but nevertheless, I did ask him. I was like, hey, are you drinking again? Is this something that, like, I need to be concerned about? And at the beginning, he denied it. Even when I could kind of smell it on him and I knew he was lying to me, I didn't push him too hard on it, you know. And I started to question in that moment the level of privacy that I should continue to keep about his first attempt, because nobody really knew about it. I didn't let anybody know. I had, even his workers, I wasn't very upfront about everything that happened. I called all the jobs he was working on, and I was very short about he had some type of family emergency and he was going to be out for a couple of weeks, you know. And when he went back, I think he told them all that he essentially realized that he was starting to have an issue with alcohol, so he checked himself into a rehab, which is not the entire truth. But again, it wasn't something I was going to push him on, and it was obvious that he didn't want people to know that that had happened. But I was still in that moment, without ousting him, I was reaching out quietly to his brother and to a couple other close friends, people that were also Marines that I felt like were kind of could understand what he was going through, because at that point I was starting to realize that this was so much deeper than I could understand.
Sure.
And I was trying to push him to people that could help him get through this. But that wasn't, either they weren't reaching out to him on a actual level, or they were reaching out to him and they couldn't actually reach him.
Right.
And he just wasn't listening. And when he got out and he started drinking more, and I started to notice it more, that self-loathing, like, that's where his drinking again became apparent. That's where it started to tell on him again, because he would message me and be like, if I wasn't such a bitch, I could just pull the trigger. You know, you deserve better. I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve to be here. You shouldn't have to deal with this. This is so unfair, and I'm so sorry. Or it would go a completely different direction, and he would just be angry at me for no reason. And then it was like, your friend posted something on Facebook and I don't like it, so you need to stop being friends with them. Even though this was somebody that I had been friends with for 25 years, you know, and it almost felt like he was trying to feed into the anger. So it was getting obvious that when he drank, it was either going to be really sad or really angry. Those were the only two directions that you could go. But when he was acting on either one of those, and it felt from out of left field. I knew in that moment that he was drinking, and he was in no position to tell me who I could and couldn't talk to.
Sure.
So it only created more frustration with us. It only created more of a defensiveness from me. I felt like I was being manipulated, not just through his drinking, but also in the way that he was trying to tell me where I was going to live, who I was going to talk to, how I could support him. It just felt like I was being used. And so that bred a lot of animosity within me. And he and our fights just became explosive in those last few weeks. And everything that almost every single time that we talked, it felt like we were arguing over something, whether it was me arguing to convince him that he was worth being alive and that I wanted him here and that I wanted to be with him, or he was attacking me, using me as some type of emotional punching bag and screaming at me and then hanging up and then calling back and screaming at me for not calling him back. It just didn't make any sense what he wanted from me, but I was trying so hard to support him through it while also dealing with my own emotional health from it. And at that point, I started to have to take a step back and realize that no matter how much I was coddling him, I wasn't helping by coddling him. So I switched gears a little bit and I became a little bit more aggressive. And that's when things got really dark. That's when the arguments, I went from being that calm, monotoned person to, if you're screaming at me, I'm screaming at you. So things got heated and I was being threatened constantly with him taking his own life. He was calling me and not just screaming, but loading guns in the background, and I would jump in the car and rush over there to him and try to talk to him just for him to threaten to call the police on me if I didn't leave because he didn't want to argue or he didn't want to be told that he was misstepping. He didn't want to be called out on anything. And then it was like, you could tell he was drinking so much because at that point, I didn't know if he was gaslighting me on purpose or if he genuinely couldn't remember what he was saying one moment to the next. And when I would pull it out, I'd be like, you just said that. And he would go, no, I didn't. And I'd be like, no, you literally just sent me a text with that. And I would show it to him. And he would get angry and he'd be like, you need to leave. You need to get out. So even though I'm trying to reason with him, he's not willing to hear me. And I'm getting to a point of I'm just so frustrated, and I'm constantly being threatened. So every time that I walk into this room, it's becoming a situation of, it's not if, it's when. I'm getting terrified more and more that I'm going to walk into that same room of that first attempt. It just keeps playing back every time I walk into that office. It's all I can think about is that that's going to happen again. But I start to become numb to it because it's constant.
Sure.
It's just every single day I'm going through. The mornings are great and the days are great. And we're talking about expectations and boundaries and how we can get back on track. But as soon as that sun set, it was like everything shifted. Every time it was just an argument. And we continued that way for weeks. And it just felt like we were getting to this breaking point. I just didn't know how to handle it anymore. And Thanksgiving rolls around. I get up that morning and I go over to my parents. And me and Mitchell we're still working on things. So Thanksgiving is a tradition. You know, we go to my parents, we help them cook, we have lunch, we go home, we relax. But this year I've decided I'm going to work because everything around me is going to be closed. I think I can capitalize on it. I'm under the full impression that I'm going to be with Mitchell all morning long, and then I'll go to work that evening. But when I get to my parents, I messaged Mitchell, and then I called him, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm over here. When you coming over? And that was when Mitchell was like, I'm not coming over, you know, and he had several different excuses, but it really just felt like he was more or less testing my patience. They didn't feel very valid. So I was frustrated, but it just didn't really seem like arguing with him was going to get me anywhere.
Sure.
So I went about my day. When I left there, I had collected some leftovers, and I went back to my house where I was staying and got ready for work. And then I headed over to go see Mitchell. And I saw him before work. I was going to go hang out with him for like an hour before I went and actually opened the bar since I didn't get to see him through the day. And I was also going to drop off our dog so that he wouldn't be alone. He had mentioned a few days prior that he really enjoyed her being there while I was working because he didn't like being alone. Sure. You know? And I headed over there. I dropped off Willow. We talked for about an hour, and I could tell that he had been drinking a little bit, and he was sad. But he was sad all the time then. Every time I saw him those last few weeks, it just felt like he was always beating himself up. So this wasn't something that was new to me. And when we sat down and talked, he didn't talk like it was the end of the world. He didn't seem suicidal. We were talking about getting him an apartment because while trying to get him sober, that office, it wasn't the best environment for him. He had done what he could as far as making sure that it was livable. He had his bathroom, he had a bed and the TV and his little Xbox to keep him intrigued and busy, but it was a far cry from a home. And it really wasn't breeding that type of environment that was good for him. So as we're sitting there talking about getting him an apartment, it didn't seem too down. It was just very matter of fact. And when I got ready to leave, like, I don't know why in that moment, but I stalled a lot. I think I was even a little late to work. But when I hugged him, something in me, it just really didn't want to let go. And I guess looking back, it might have just been a feeling. But like, he didn't say anything that made me think any differently. I just felt like I was stuck there. And when I leaned in to kiss him, he didn't even actually kiss me. He just kissed me on the forehead and said some snide comment about how he hoped that me working that night was going to be worth it. Which was a punch to the gut. You know, it didn't feel good, but I was used to those kind of remarks, you know, especially since a lot of our arguments were about me bartending at that point. And it had never really been an issue up until then. And it wasn't like he was a jealous person or anything like that. It was more about the fact that he just wanted me to do better in life. And he didn't know how to portray that correctly. So when we would argue about it, he would scream at me about just being a bartender. You're never going to be anything but a bartender. And that was his way of trying to like tough love me out of it. You know, grow up and get a real job, you know. And so I was used to remarks of that such. Like, it stung, but it wasn't alarming. Okay. And so I left and I got to work. And before I even got out of my car, it was only like a 10-minute drive, he had already messaged me and was like, I love you. And I responded and told him I loved him too before I even walked into work. And then maybe 2 hours goes by and I didn't really hear anything from him, but I didn't really have my phone on me either, to be honest. I've never been one of those bartenders. I don't like seeing bartenders on their phones, so I'm not going to be on my phone. Right. Not to mention I was really accurate in thinking about opening because I was busy. Okay. You know, there was nothing else open. So there was about 30 people in that bar. And at this particular bar that I was working that night, I am the manager. I'm the bartender. I'm the bar back. I'm the security. There is nobody else in my bar as backup. There's nobody to help me. So if I need to leave, that door's got to be locked. If I need to leave for whatever reason, like I can't just walk out. There's a process that has to be gone through. So as I'm standing there at the bar and it's loud, there's a lot of people in there, 9:37 hits and my phone goes off. And I didn't have it on me, but I had my headset on so I could hear it. And when I answered it, I didn't hear anything at first. And I walked over and checked my phone and it was Mitchell that I was on the phone with. But again, it was really loud. So I walked to the back and at first I don't really think that he was saying anything. It was just like listening. And so I started responding and I was just like, are you okay? What's going on? What can I do to help? You know? And the only thing he really said was, I love you. And when I responded, I was just so thrown off by it that I didn't really say it back like a declaration. I said it like a question. I still think about that a lot. And then he just hung up. And that was when I saw the messages of him saying, there was like 3 of them. And it said, I want to tell you everything. I just can't. And I'm sorry. And the last one just said, I need help. So I responded and I was like, just wait for me to get off work, babe. I'll be there when I get off, you know? And again, this wasn't abnormal behavior for Mitchell because at this point, like we were in fights all the time. He was constantly threatening his life. He was constantly telling me that life wasn't worth it without me or that he didn't deserve to live. So it was hard for me to realize how serious these messages were in that moment. I knew he was struggling, but I didn't know it was that. You know, every time I tried to ask him when he would get upset and say something off the wall, and I'd be like, you know, I do want you to live. It's not that serious. And he would get irritated and he would yell at me for even insinuating that he would try to take his life again. And so I thought that was kind of behind us, even though he was talking in a weird way, it just didn't register in that moment, but it felt off. But I still had to go back to work. So I went back in and I put on this brave face and I was talking to my customers and trying to make jokes. And I just really couldn't shake this feeling that something bad was happening. So I asked one of my friends that was at the bar that also knew Mitchell if he would reach out and talk to him. And I remember when I looked at him, I was just like, I just don't have time for this. Can you please check on him? And I was very matter of fact about that. And he said that he didn't respond. So I continued for a couple more hours. And as I was getting ready to close up the bar, I realized that stopping to stock and everything, it was just going to take way too long. And part of me was just exhausted, but the other part of me felt like I really needed to get out of there. So I went ahead and texted my boss, and I was like, I'll be back in the morning and I'll finish everything that I need to do, but I've got to get out of here. It's late. I'm tired. And so I left. Something in me knew that I should have gone straight to Mitchell, because I had messaged him a couple of times after that and was trying to check on him, but he wasn't responding. So I assumed that he fell asleep like he normally did.
Sure.
When he did this. So I did stop at a different place on my way home. It was a little closer to my house. And I started to have a beer, but I really just couldn't. I just couldn't shake that feeling that it just didn't feel right. So I think I made it maybe like a third of the way through, and I just left. And then something on that drive over there, it felt off. Like I didn't speed. I didn't have my music going like I normally did. I didn't panic or feel like I was rushing. And I think a lot of that was just the fact that I was terrified of whatever impending doom it felt like I was walking into. And it was just a really eerie feeling. And when I got to the office, the first thing I noticed was that the door was unlocked and the keys were in the door. So, like, really anybody could have just walked in there. And when you walk in, you walk right into this, like, little office area. And then you go down this little... You have this option of you can go straight into the warehouse area, or you can turn right, and that's like the room where he had his mattress and TV and stuff. And so I walked up to the door frame and I flipped on the lights. And there was so much about the scene that just wasn't new to me. At first I realized that, like, the bottle and the gun in his hand, but I was used to that. And then I noticed that his glasses being tilt, but there was a lot of nights that I was trying to get Mitchell's glasses off, and it was common for him to fall asleep with them on. And as I stood there, I started to wait for his chest to rise and fall. And it just never did. And that was when I think my brain started to put together what had actually happened. I started to notice, like, dried blood under his nose. And then there was this tear in the pillowcase. And I'm not really sure how long I stood there before I walked up to the side of the bed. And that's when I could really tell what had happened. And I could see that he had shot himself. And there was just this massive puddle of blood next to the bed. And even though, like, I knew that he was gone, there was something else in me that, like, needed to know that. So I had to reach over and touch his leg, and he was just so cold. And in that moment, I think shock really set in, and I went into this mode of, like, a different kind of panic, like a silent panic. And I had to figure out, like, what was the next step? What do I do next? And I slowly started to back away, and I pulled out my phone and I called 911. And I remember telling her very matter of fact that, like, my husband had just killed himself and I needed help. But it was at that moment that, like, I started to think about the fact that, like, I didn't know where Willow was. And I really wasn't sure if I was looking for her or another body, because I just wasn't entirely sure of, like, how everything went down. I didn't want to believe that Mitchell would do that, but I couldn't believe that he had done what he did. And I walked out front and looked for her for a second. And then I went back inside and went straight back to the warehouse and started looking for her. And she wasn't in there. So I went back to the bedroom, and I thought maybe that the shot had probably scared her. So I got down and was checking up underneath the bed for her. And she wasn't there, so I went to go get up, but that was when I didn't even realize how close I was to this massive puddle that was, like, inches from my face. I don't know. I really don't even know how I didn't get it all over me. And I immediately, like, went outside because something in my brain, it couldn't fathom losing both of them at the same time. And when I got out front, I was just screaming as loud as I possibly could for her. It's the only thing I could do was just yell for her. And I remember the dispatcher begging me to quit screaming. And I just couldn't, or I wouldn't. And I guess it was probably like 7 or 8 minutes before I started to hear the cops pull up. I could hear the sirens. And the first set of cops went to go inside. And the second cops came up to me. And immediately they could tell that I was just completely irrational. And I wasn't really going to be much of help, so they offered to go find Willow for me. And it was in that moment after they left that I realized that I had to start making phone calls to family and parents. And even though Mitchell's parents didn't live far, they were out of town visiting, so they were a couple of states away at the time. And when I called, I knew to call his mom, but when she answered the phone and I told her, as bad as it was in that moment to find Mitchell that way, hearing his mom's reaction, hearing her wail on that phone was just, it was something that then and still haunts me. It was like, in that moment, I had to accept that Mitchell was gone. And the reality started to like crash down onto me. And then I called his brother. And that was a lot more calm. But he was pretty aware of everything that Mitchell had been going through. And then I called my roommate, and asked her to come get me. And that's when the ambulance got there, and they forced me into the back of the ambulance. And I know that the paramedics were trying to make me feel better, but the fact that they were saying things the way that they did, it really wasn't what I wanted to hear in that moment. They just kept saying, like, I can't believe he did this to you, and you know this isn't your fault. What a terrible thing to do to you. This is awful. Like, he's just a terrible thing that he did, you know, and it came off more like they were trying to call him a bad person and saying that he did this to me, you know, not to himself. And I just remember, like, at that point, I was just like shaking. I don't think I had cried at that point yet. And I just kept saying, like, no, he was a good man. And just remember it made me so angry because, like, they didn't understand what he was struggling with. They didn't understand what he had been going through. And even though a lot of it was very hurtful to me, it's still like I wanted to protect him. And when my roommate got there, it was like right when they got there with Willow too. They had found her about a quarter mile up the road. And so she took the dog and told me that she had called my parents on her way there. And when they rolled up, I still wasn't allowed to leave because of the fact that they had to wait for the detective to get there. And I remember, like, I just had to go to the bathroom so bad. And, of course, I wasn't allowed inside at this point, and I wasn't allowed to leave the scene because they were scared I was going to wash my hands. And my dad just got so mad about this. He was so pissed off. And I just kept begging him to, like, let it go. You know, like, they're doing their job. I understand why I can't leave, you know, and I just couldn't deal with him making this situation any worse than it already was. And finally the detective pulled up. And it happened to be a friend of mine. And I remember being just pissed off when I saw him. I was just like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You know, and I knew that was like me being irritated. The fact that, like, I didn't want anybody to know what had happened. I didn't want Mitchell's reputation to be ruined. And when he got there, like, I heard him asking, like, where's his wife? And he walked up to me and, like, before he could even ask the first question, he started to look up from the clipboard. And, like, as his eyes met mine, he started to realize who I was. He really didn't say anything else. He just kind of hugged me and asked me a couple questions and told me to go home. So I got back in the truck with my parents. As we were getting ready to leave, there was a car pulling up, but I didn't know who it was. My mom said that she had called the pastor, and that was the pastor behind us. As we were getting ready to pull out, like, he turns around. I just remember jumping out of the truck and running up to his car and telling him that he needed to turn around because I needed him to go back and pray over Mitchell before he left. It was really important to me that I don't think I've ever told this story and not cried. But I had him go back and pray over Mitchell. And then we went back to my parents' house. And I remember him trying to reason with me, and I wasn't willing to accept anything he was saying because I went to church with my grandmother, and she was Catholic. And so as a Catholic, I was raised that, suicide's considered the ultimate sin. It's something you can't ask forgiveness for. It's almost certainly damnation, and I can't imagine the idea of Mitchell being sent to that. So I chose not to believe anything in that moment. And I just remember begging them to take me home because I couldn't. It was already like 5 a.m. at that point. I was just exhausted. I was so tired, and I was still in shock, and I couldn't believe what was happening. And so they finally did take me back home. And I remember going into the living room, and I don't ever really hang out in the living room. It's always out back or I'm in bed asleep. It's never just there. But at this point, my roommate and her daughter were up, and I sat down on the couch, and her daughter walked up to me, and I don't know what it was about the innocence of her knowing that I was hurting in that moment. But when she walked up to me, the only thing she wanted to do was hug me. And when I hugged her, that was the first time that I remembered crying. And it just broke me.
What's going on, Team Trek family? Welcome back to another episode. We're starting part 3 of Samantha's survival with Miss Samantha Bassett. Samantha, welcome back to Team Trek Podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So it's been roughly a month since we've been together, and when we left you at the end of part 2, we left you in a house with your roommate and her daughter, and everything was kind of sinking in. Can you take us back to that day?
Well, that was about 5 a.m. So I think I just sat there and laid on the couch in shock, probably until about noon of that next day. And that's when his brother and my in-laws got back into town. And then I briefly, but not really, remember going over there. I know that I was there, but I don't exactly remember everything that we talked about at that time. And then I think it was about a week later that we ended up doing the funeral. I couldn't actually tell you what day it was. I think it was that next Thursday, but I'm not 100% at this point.
Okay. So in those final weeks leading up to and then through the event, how was it you found yourself taking steps forward after all of that?
At first, I didn't. At first, I kind of just sat on my couch. Outside of the initial funeral planning, which I had a lot of help from the community, the VFW, the Legion, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, they all really pitched in to help me along with my parents. And we got it done from there. But once the funeral was over and everybody went home, I just kind of crashed and burned for a couple weeks, and I never really left my couch. I didn't talk to people, including even my roommates. I was just kind of shut off from the world.
Okay. I think we can understand that. So after that quiet time, after everything kind of went quiet for a while, what was it that started to kind of tell you who you were again?
I don't know if it ever actually went quiet, because Mitchell was so well known in the community and I was so well known in the community. It may have not been the same people reaching out to me every single day, but it didn't feel like there was a day going by that there weren't at least a few people trying to reach out to me. And if anything, that may have made me seclude myself a little bit more. But actually what I ended up doing was, when I was trying to do my benefits, I had gone to the VSO, and that was when I started to realize the dumpster fire of the VA stuff that Mitchell had been dealing with, because I knew of the debt, but I wasn't 100% sure of why it existed or how much it truly was. And that was where I found out that he had been dropped down to 0% PTSD rating, and that that when we called, their call log didn't actually have like any record since he had been in Alabama. There was no records of him calling or me calling. And so that was extremely frustrating.
So is that what made you initially start speaking out about this?
Yes, but it was also, I wanted to push it out into the public. I wanted to understand what had happened. And as I was looking up all of these statistics and stats and finding out exactly the number 22, about 22 veterans a day taking their own life, and when in actuality, like, it's more about like 44 a day. But it's outraging. Maybe if this was a one-off, maybe if this was something that never really happened, I could have accepted quietly what happened to Mitchell. But because this is affecting so many people every single day, I was angry. It's a failed system, and I felt like Mitchell had been done dirty by this system, and it pissed me off. So that's where everything started. It didn't start off as me wanting to necessarily do anything but make people aware of what happened and why it happened, and making sure that somebody took responsibility in the ways that he was neglected through that system.
With all of that, and with you starting to go public and speaking out on it, what more have you discovered through the past year besides the numbers? I mean, you said it went from your understanding of 22 a day to realizing it's more like 44 a day. Beyond that, what else were you finding out through these systems?
What I was kind of seeing with the veterans that I was dealing with as I was trying to push out this information was the commonalities that Mitchell shared with them, such as the failure of reintegration and this longing want for purpose. I think when you think veteran, a lot of people think PTSD, but nobody really branches into the moral injury. And so it's been almost reassuring to them when I talk to them about moral injury, because most of them have no idea what it is. And so I try to just bring to light the things that they're dealing with and why they seem to be dealing with it as it concurs with what Mitchell was going through, such as the alcoholism and the mental issues and the financial troubles and just that want for something more.
So how has your understanding of moral injury changed now that you've talked to so many veterans and their families?
I don't think it's necessarily changed by any means because of talking to them about it. I think it's more about just informing them of what it is, because it is so unknown. Where you have PTSD being a disorder, moral injury is that psychological response. And so it's essentially your fight or flight response in a situation. And that could be whether you're witnessing it or being a part of it or perpetrating it. With Mitchell, it was specifically about perpetrating. He enjoyed the act of being the perpetrator when he was in war, just because that's what you're taught to do, right? Take out the bad guys, take out the monsters. And he was doing that. And that gives him a level of pride, a level of, I really enjoy doing this. I'm doing a good job. And then to come back over here, other people didn't understand it. And even outside of doing the job, he was avenging brothers and sisters. And that was something for him to be extremely proud of in that moment. And many other service members are, but then they're patronized for it back here. And then you talk about it. When I talk to other veterans, a lot of them don't want to admit to being the perpetrator. Most of them talk about the witness side of moral injury, and that really had a lot to do with the rules of engagement when I talked to them. So in some scenarios, they'd be with some guys on the side of the street and they would watch the locals being tortured by their government, and they're not allowed to intervene. And so they had to watch something that they don't agree with and not help them, even though they felt like, hey, all it would do would just take over there and engage, just stop him, but they can't interact with it, even though they have the capability of stopping it, and they carry that guilt for that later on.
No, I agree. So what do you wish the average American understood about moral injury?
If there's one thing that I wish everybody understood about moral injury is that it's a human thing. It's a human response, and that anybody can have it, even myself. For me, it came from the amount of relief that I felt after I found him, essentially. Because in that moment, that psychological warfare was over. The fight, the peace was there. And I was comforted by knowing that Mitchell had found peace, even if I knew it was going to come and cost me mine, That created that sense of relief. And immediately after, I felt guilty, So that created my own sense of moral injury, but it's not something that a pill is going to fix. It's not something that you can work out. It is something that you have to come at peace with yourself. It comes with forgiveness and understanding and empathy for your situation during that time. For me, it comes from having the empathy for myself to know that I was put under a lot of duress during the last few weeks of Mitchell's death. And the way that I felt, that relief, just like Mitchell, the way that he felt, that proud enjoyment from eliminating people, it was a response. It was a psychological response in that moment. And you didn't continue to feel it. I don't continue to feel relief because Mitchell's gone. It was just an instant moment. and it haunts you. It eats away at your soul. Whereas PTSD is, it's reaction, it's fear-based. Moral injury it's not fear-based by any means. It's just something that sits on you all day, every day, and it can exasperate your PTSD for sure. And mixed in together, it is an absolutely deadly combination.
No, I agree. And so kind of the two part to that is how does that moral injury and suicide play into the same, play together? Is it a treatment thing? Because again, you mentioned PTSD is a reactionary thing. Moral injury is not. So how do you treat that moral injury, and are we just mistreating it?
Like I said, moral injury, it comes with forgiveness and grace for your circumstances, how you chose to survive when you needed to, regardless of the situation. You chose to survive, and you have to be able to come at peace with that. And people find different ways to come at peace with that. Some of them choose meditating. Some of them choose grief groups. Some of them choose religion. It's all about in what you personally believe. Mine comes from acceptance of myself. It comes from inward for me. I don't necessarily feel the need to apologize to anyone, including a God, for how I felt when I felt that way. This is something that has to do with me, and that's just personally how I believe in it. I believe peace starts within.
Absolutely. So for spouses and family members that are watching somebody struggle with moral injury or with PTSD, what advice do you wish that you had known back then, or somebody had given you, prior to going into this? What could have possibly helped you?
I think just understanding that moral injury was not PTSD helps a lot, because a lot of it is in identifying it. Like we said, that PTSD is fear-based. It usually has a lot to do with something that is triggering you, and it deals with flashbacks. Whereas moral injury seems like the same because it's also invisible. It's in your head, but it does not deal with other people. It has more of an effect of yourself. It has to do with guilt and shame and self-loathing. So that's what makes moral injury more deadly. When you are suffering from a PTSD episode, because it's fear-based, it's usually based in self-preservation, which is going to cause you to hurt somebody else way before you hurt yourself, right? Like, you're in survival mode. Moral injury, when you're suffering from that, you're not in survival mode. You're in almost the exact opposite. And then when you get overwhelmed by being in that non-survival mode and you find something that triggers you, or you're in a PTSD episode and you start to realize where you are and what you've done and everything else, it can trigger one or the other, exasperating those feelings. And I just wish that I would have known the difference. And one of the things that I told Mitchell, but I just couldn't quite get to him, but I still feel like everybody that suffers from it should know, is that bad people don't wrestle with guilt. Evil people do not wrestle with guilt in any way, shape, form, or fashion. The way that Mitchell felt bad enough about not feeling bad enough, that was guilt in itself. He felt bad that he enjoyed it. That was guilt. And evil people don't wrestle with guilt. So that in its own was an implication of his inherent goodness.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what are some of the biggest warning signs that you think people overlook?
I think alcoholism is a big one. I think a lot of times when somebody is suffering from something mentally, any type of alcoholism and substance abuse is a major warning signal, because it typically, especially when overdone, is an escape. And it's probably one of the worst things that they can choose to do because alcohol is a depressant. It's only going to exemplify whatever feelings they're already feeling.
That's right.
So I feel like anybody suffering from moral injury or PTSD, I'm not going to say you shouldn't drink at all, but I'm going to say you should definitely try to drink in moderation. Watch yourself because it can come into a very slippery slope. And always remember that it is going to exemplify whatever feelings you have. So if you're sad, that glass of bourbon is only going to make you feel worse.
That's right.
And I just don't think that that's something that if you're struggling really deeply that you should be doing, especially if you're having suicidal ideations or tendencies. You need to stay away from alcohol. That was a big tipper. Also, the constant apologizing for being complicated or hurting, or if somebody's lashing out and then immediately apologizing, that rage burst followed up by immediate apologies is normally a good indicator that somebody is having some type of internal conflict with themselves more than you, because they're watching themselves blow up on you and then they immediately regret it. And that was something that you could see through Mitchell a lot. And it comes out as, I'm not good enough for you, or you deserve better than me, or the world would be better off if I wasn't here. You know, those are the type of things that I had to listen to quite a bit. Lack of hobbies. Mitchell really liked going to the gym. And towards the end, when he was struggling, during his sober time, he went to the gym. But you noticed in those last few weeks and before his first attempt, he quit going to the gym. His confidence was going down. He was constantly tired and irritable. And the biggest key to that was watching the facade change. Like, they say that people with suicidal tendencies tend to be the happiest people. You know, they seem the happiest. And Mitchell was very, very good example of that, because he was great at making everybody think that he was okay when he was not. There are still people to this day that have no idea that it was anywhere near as bad as it was.
So in your experience, when people start to shut down emotionally and that, you know, they set up that wall, what are things that actually work to break through that wall?
In my experience, the shutdown came before the end. Towards the end, Mitchell wasn't shut out at all when it came to me personally. Like, to his friends, to everybody else trying to talk to him, he did kind of seclude himself from the world. But for me, it was a grasp. It was the one extreme or the other. It was grabbing onto me and trying to hold on to me like I could never go anywhere. Life is only worth living for me. He loved me so much. He just needed me, just needed this, just needed that, to an obsessive level. Or the other end of the spectrum, it was just he could not stand to be around me, had to attack me, had to be aggressive towards me, had to like push out rage on me. Like, he was constantly throwing emotion. There wasn't a moment that he wasn't contacting me. I just didn't know if it was going to be good or bad, but he was scrambling.
Where's your head out when all that's going on? I mean, I know we touched on it, in part two, but it just sounds like you were kind of grasping at straws, trying to survive yourself.
And I was probably definitely a lot closer to Mitchell's demise before he died than after. And that was because I was terrified and my mental health was not good because of everything that we were going through. The push and pull was just absolutely eating me alive. I did not know how to handle it. I didn't know that I could even try to explain that I was also hurting. I'd just gone through that hysterectomy, so my emotions were already all over the place. And then Mitchell was doing so much and being so much. There was no room for me to exist amongst all of it. And it just silenced me to a point where I felt like I was drowning and I couldn't keep myself afloat, much less him. But I still put everything of mine on the back burner to try to help him at every single turn. And I think he knew that was also taking a toll on me, and that hurt him as well, because he had mentioned that in the times where he's, oh, I love you. You deserve better than this because you're giving me everything, trying to do everything for me. You care so much for me, and I've been doing horrible things, or I'm a horrible person, or I've done horrible things before. And now I'm just yelling at you, or I'm always angry, or I never want to do this, or I'm always sad, or I drink too much, and you just don't deserve that. So, like, you could tell that there was a massive mix of emotions during that time coming from both of us. And I tried, after his first attempt, coddling him and protecting him. But right there towards the end, and maybe like the last week or two, I did become aggressive towards him a little bit. If you're screaming at me, I'm screaming at you. So I was about at my wit's ends as well.
I'm sure. So now you got the grief and the mission now, and then who's Samantha today?
Samantha's trying to figure that out. Samantha has no idea who she is today, but I've recently moved. I have pending my background check, and trust me, I haven't done anything crazy other than that DUI we talked about, so I should get the job. But I was offered a job with Harley Davidson, so I'm going to be over there selling bikes.
Let's go.
I want so badly to look at Mitchell and go, see, I'm not going to be just a bartender, so badly. But it's okay. I feel like he knows somehow.
Absolutely. So outside, so what brings you joy today that didn't back then?
I think that's actually the opposite question. I'm trying to refine joy in things that I actually did used to like. And I've noticed now, I guess the best way I can explain it is that I grieve so heavily, and I don't want to say grieved because I do still grieve him. Even we're 2 weeks away from 1 year now. Yeah. I still grieve very heavily for him. But because of that fight or flight for such a long period of time, not just after his death, but before, my nerves are just shot. My neurons, I have to suppose, are just absolutely dulled at this point. So I live, or at least try to live, more of a high adrenaline life these days. I enjoy things that are like helicopter hog hunting and paranormal investigations and getting in the ocean. These are all things that I wouldn't have normally done when Mitchell was still alive. But now, it feels like I have to do extra to feel anything, because I can go to a busy bar or a concert and everybody around me looks like they're having the time of their life, and I just feel so dead inside. So I really do. I search out higher adrenaline things these days.
So when you look at yourself now, what do you see that wasn't there before?
I think I've always known that I was resilient, but this is a different level. It's absolutely shown me that I have the ability to accomplish a lot more than I've given myself credit for over the years. It has forced me to step out of my comfort zone and practice doing things that normally I probably never would have tried, because it's hard to walk away from something that you're good at. And when you're a good bartender, you make a lot of money. It's really, really easy to make a lot of money when you're good at it.
Oh, yeah.
And so this has really pushed me out of a comfort zone opening up so many different possibilities for me. And I know Mitchell would be absolutely just livid if I didn't take every single chance that was there, if I didn't try to push out of this box. Because deep down, I know that he thought that what he was doing was for my better. It was not. It absolutely was not. I would so much rather be finding all this out with him still here. Yeah. And I feel like there's absolutely a world where I could have with him still here. It's not like it wouldn't be possible with him still here. But I still feel like he genuinely believed that, and he would be proud to know that I didn't stay stagnant. I didn't return to what was before. And I am trying to do something more for not just me, but several other people that also are going through things like he went through. Because even though he fought it valiantly by himself, I know he would have appreciated somebody fighting for him, somebody that knew what they were doing.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. If Mitchell can see the impact you're having today, what would he want people to know about you?
Mitchell would want to tell everybody, be prepared. Samantha is hard-headed. She's stubborn. And she's determined when she's going to get something, she's going to get it. She's going to go for it hard and heavy. I will burn down the entire world to get where I'm going.
I love it. Okay. So a couple last questions, but what do you want someone listening who feels hopeless or broken to hear right now?
I don't believe anybody is past hope, period. Until you take that last breath, you are never hopeless. You are never beyond hope. And pain does not make you broken. It just makes you human. Resilience is not about never breaking. It's about standing up every time you do.
I love that. Okay. So what's next for you? How do you see, where do you see this mission going?
For now, I am really just trying to get my life back on track. As I said, I've just moved to a brand new area. It's a different state for me, so it's new. I'm starting a new job that's completely out of my wheelhouse, but I feel pretty confident. Picked up working as the military family consult for DITJ Foundation. So I help them with putting together VSO packets and stuff for other widows and things of that such, just kind of helping people through a process that I've already been through so that they don't have to scrounge like I did. But eventually I do want to be in the nonprofit sector as far as wanting to create at least something that taps the reintegration process and the job availabilities. A lot of people want to help homelessness and things of that such, and I love that. I really do. But it feels like a Band-Aid. The way that we're going about things, where I have noticed the problem being is people transitioning out. They transition out, they can't find a job. Now all of a sudden they're sitting there, and that's what starts to cause the homelessness. Right. That's what causes the mental issues. They get so out of hand. That's what causes the hopelessness. But if we can ease the transition into the civilian sector, I feel like we would have a lot more success in downing the rates of suicide amongst veterans, just because we're trying to get ahead of the problem instead of waiting until the absolute extreme to get involved. Like, it just feels insane to me that most of these people have to hit rock bottom before people are willing to reach out and help them. And I just don't want to be that person. I want to catch you right out the gate. So if and when I push through a nonprofit, I want it to be something that focuses in on trade schools and transitioning all of those military people over towards another job or sector that can help relate back, even if that's security or learning a new trade or just something that corresponds back into the civilian world. I'm also working on a book. I'm unsure if I'm ever going to publish it, but it kind of started off as me kind of just talking to my phone, because getting services for everything that I need through a therapist with my insurance coverage and Mitchell being gone is extremely hard to find people that aren't just straight grief counselors. I want somebody that's all in one. I have more issues than grief. I have other trauma. I have moral injury. I have ADHD. I have insomnia. I went to a therapist before Mitchell died. I have prior issues, and I don't want to go to 5 or 6 different therapists. So to find somebody that really encapsulates and can deal with all of my issues, that also takes my insurance, that's also accepting new patients right now, it's slim to nil. It's very hard to find. And so I started talking to my phone, and somehow or another it kind of turned into a book. And I keep going through and trying to edit it, and I'm not sure that it'll ever get published, but if there's one thing I know, it has helped, because it's been its own type of exposure therapy to me, to have to relive it and go through it. And it really goes through and explains the different stressors, and much of like what we talked about through this interview. And it has 8 parts. And it starts off with part 1, the failure of reintegration and a search for purpose. Part 2 is the VA, a broken system. Part 3 is moral injury and PTSD. Part 4 is alcoholism and the first attempt. Part 5 is the relationship and the course of it. Part 6 is Thanksgiving Day, 2024, the day that I found Mitchell. Part 7 is the aftermath. And I'm still working on part 8 now that I've moved down here, and it's going to be called The Revival. And so I'm looking forward to kind of putting that all together. It is a non-linear book. It restarts in each section. Each section gets bigger and bigger as we go, and it's meant to paint a picture of the entire situation, because when this happens to somebody, everybody wants to know why. Right. Everybody wants to know, well, was it this or was it that? And there was no reason why. There was no one particular reason. There was a multitude of stressors that all led up to a very, very irrational decision in a split second.
That's right.
And I can explain those stressors to anybody any day of the week and explain why it was creating pressure in his life. But at the end of the day, I cannot sit here and rationalize an irrational decision. And that is exactly what Mitchell made that night, was a very, very irrational decision.
Yeah, that's right. 100% agree. I was hoping you would bring up the book. I didn't know if we were going to do a pre-book release or not. I did get a chance to read probably 90% of what you're at, and
yeah, probably about 80, the skeleton of it.
Yeah, and 100% I agree. It will help. It's the way you answer the questions and the way that you are able to digest, especially moral injury. You answer it on a different level than I've ever heard before, and that's what originally brought the interest in us having a conversation. So I hope you do end up publishing it, and I hope you come back to do the release here. But let's go back to the nonprofit space. And you had mentioned that you work, I'm not going to say solely, but the majority of the veterans that you work with are veterans that have suffered a loss of some sort, right? Whether it was a family member, a spouse, or something of that nature. And let's talk a little bit on that nonprofit you're working with now.
We just did our very first event last Sunday, so that was exciting, in Hoover, Alabama, and we had a good turnout for sure, and I was very excited to be there. We brought in a bunch of different resources as well. We had other nonprofits there and some music and guest speakers. as a brand new organization, as we get ready to take off, as of right now, we're more of a networking organization. So we help veterans that are in need. If they come to us at the moment, we're going to push them to an already vetted organization that provides whatever they're looking for, whether that be financial help, whether that be a VSO or mental health or homelessness or some type of schooling, anything that we can help put them in the right direction. That's what we're doing at the moment because we have just started. So we've got to be able to build that operations fund, as most people do. And then we're going to look into doing like VA classes and things of that sort, helping people navigate the system so that everybody gets a chance to get what they're earned.
That sounds great. So let's talk a little bit about your specific position. I don't remember what you said it was. Can you say it again? And then where do you fall in that space?
So I'm the military family consult. Once we get an operational budget, that would put me in the position of talking to those other widows and widowers and helping family basically navigate the casualty assistance side of it, because you do have casualty assistance, and sometimes your casualty assistance officer is amazing and sometimes they're terrible, just like VSOs. Sometimes your VSO is going to be amazing, and sometimes they're going to be terrible. And it just helps to have somebody that has been through the process go through it with you. Sure. Also, I've noticed that with some VSOs, their forms and whatnot, it's a lot of forms.
Yeah. When
somebody you love in the military dies. And a lot of times they don't necessarily leave a guide behind on how to deal with that and who to call, where to call, what to say, what they have available to them, what their benefits may be, what they paid into, a lot of times we don't know that. So it just helps to have somebody that has been through it. And then I actually had a pretty amazing casualty assistance officer on Maxwell Air Force Base that put a beautiful package together for me. And so my next mission as the military family consult is to get in contact with him once I get settled in and have him make all of those packets for me. And then just going ahead and taking a pre-done package to every single VSO that I can think of in county ranges of the organization itself. That way, when somebody comes to them, they're not searching through everything. They already have this folder. We're not worried about missing anything. It's going to guide them through everything. And I noticed that was needed when I helped another widow go through the VSO process. And the VSO was she was very knowledgeable, but she was still new.
Sure.
So she was asking me things that I did. She wanted to see my paperwork to make sure she was getting everything down, because the widow had such a similar case to me, and she just wanted to make sure that she was doing right by this woman. So I appreciated her honesty in wanting to do that, but it showed the need for that to be spread out.
Okay. No, that I agree, and it helps us to, again, not have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Right.
So it's not like it's the first time. Talk to me a little bit about the Green Star Widow program. That I've heard that it's somewhat new, or it's being launched. What do you know about it that you can tell us?
I don't know a ton about it on specifics, but what I do know is that it's starting to be federally recognized, and it does need support. So if you go to the Green Star Families on Facebook, or I think they're on Instagram, but on TikTok as well, they have all of the ways put out that you can help them have this pushed. And what a Green Star family is specifically the survivors of a veteran who has committed suicide. And part of what I do know what they're pushing for is mental health services for those surviving families. So like I talked to you about how I can't find anybody to help me that's going to take my insurance. They want to make sure that people don't run into that issue. So I think it is a really great cause.
Yeah, I agree with you. So absolutely, if we'll put some links down below. We'll have to we'll have to get all that stuff pulled together, but I definitely want to help support that. And for our listeners at home, please go and check those things out. So, all right, Sam, well, let's hear just a little bit more about what I want to kind of push you to do this book. So where are we at with it? What's holding you up from finishing, and why are you concerned about publishing?
I think what scares me about it is just getting the story down. Because I chose to do it the way that I did, it's very, very hard to edit because it does repeat itself a lot. And as the person that wrote it, knowing where everything came from, one, it already sounds repetitive to me because I wrote it over and over and over and over and over again, and it just makes it a little bit complicated because of the nonlinear storytelling that I'm doing. And I hate repeating myself. I really, really dislike repeating myself. I like my things to be fresh. So as I go through it, I just keep noticing, maybe I should switch this, maybe I should switch that. And then it's just personal. That would be about the only other reason that I wouldn't push it out there, is because it did start off as basically a journal or a diary, and it's scary to put out there. But if I can get it together and make sure that it makes sense, and I feel that it could be valuable to other people, then I will push it.
Well, I really hope you do, because I know it's going to bring value into the world. Speaking of bringing value, just not to put you on the spot, but why are we doing this?
Because Mitchell's story deserves to be told. Because Mitchell's legacy, I refuse to let die with him. And because there are too many people that are also going through it. If I could just save one person, just one, from going through anything that he went through, or one person from going through what I have been through, I want to. There's a common saying that people say all the time, that hurt people hurt people. And that's true a lot of the times. But hurt people don't have to hurt people. They can heal people too. And I'm hoping by doing what I do that it's enough to take the pain for everybody else so that they don't have to deal with it.
Well, I thank you for what you're doing. You have a huge heart, and it takes a lot of courage to come on here and to speak on these personal things. We all have, those same fears of being judged for saying the wrong thing. Again, it's you don't know what to say.
Less is more.
Yeah. Do you have any advice on what is a good thing to say?
I think the only one that I have heard so far, and you can relate it to whatever faith or karma that you want to push it to, but the way that it was worded to me was that God doesn't waste a heartbreak. So it's not discrediting your pain. It's not discrediting the tragedy. It's giving hope that even though you have been busted down, you still have the availability to use that pain for good. And you don't have to be a victim of your own circumstance unless you choose to be.
Okay. I like that one a lot. God doesn't waste a heartbreak. I think that's excellent. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for coming and telling us this story. Like I said, I know it's going to have a massive impact on everybody that watches it. If anybody needs to reach out, get a hold of you guys, what's the easiest way to get in touch with y'all?
The easiest way to get in touch is to go through the ditjfoundation.org.
Okay, ditjfoundation.org. All right, we'll definitely put that link down below. Social media is where people can find you.
I'm Samantha Bassett everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere you go, I'm going to be Samantha Bassett, and you can find me through that.
Okay, awesome. And we are going to keep up with you on your book. when you do your book release, we'd love to have you back. Come out here and we can talk through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam.
Of course.